From now on, he's going to live his life for himself. He won't ever go to places like school, colleges, or graduate schools. He promised this to himself before. A man asks Li Han to look over there. It looks like they are about to arrive. That place is called Ein Rogard, which is the best magic school in the empire. The man with Li Han is really impressed. He used to think he was just an old and useless knight, but now he's excited to travel with Li Han. The man also mentions how Li Han has grown up from being a small child. He says that Li Han is going to join Einrogard as well. But Li Han doesn't say anything. He couldn't avoid going to schools, not even in this life. Scene changes, someone has graduated, and another person is congratulating him for leaving behind a tough life. He can't believe that he made it through many years studying with those professors. Someone asks a boy if he wants to join the professor's hiking club on weekends. The boy says he thinks it's too important for him to join. A professor asks another boy if he can finish a task tonight. The boy says yes, but secretly, he knows he won't get any sleep tonight. One boy asks his friend how long they've been eating triangle gimbaps. Someone else tells his friend that being a graduate student is usually like this, and he thinks his friend is impressive. His friend asks if that's true. The friend says he just did what he thought he should. The first friend thinks the other friend doesn't really understand what he did. He suggests doing it again since it suits him, but the other friend declines, saying, "No, thanks." He says no matter how people saw him, he tried his best. He says he won't go near anything related to school anymore. He says he never wants to be in a place like graduate school again. He wants to live a life just for himself. Suddenly, a bus comes towards him. The bus driver can't control the brakes and tells him to move. Unfortunately, a terrible thing happens. Even though his degree and graduation certificate are worthless now, he still doesn't want to be near schools in his next life. When he's reborn as a baby, he remembers everything. He's named Li Han Wardenas, the third child of the powerful Wardenas mage family in the empire. Li Han wonders if this is real, reincarnation in another world and as a noble, the third child of a noble family with wealth and power. Li Han thinks this might be a reward for enduring the life of a graduate student in his past life. He believes it's finally time to live an easy life. However, Li Han is very wrong. In the Wardenas family, there's a rule. The first child gets everything from the family. The other children have to find their own way to survive. Arlalong is surprised when Li Han asks him to teach him sword fighting. Li Han says he thinks it might be useful, and he doesn't have much else to do. Luckily, Li Han has a chance to learn anything he wants. Arlalong asks if Li Han plans to become a swordsman for real. Li Han says no, he's going to be a mage. It seems like the safest choice. Arlalong asks why the safest choice, and Li Han worries that he might sound lacking in ambition. Arlalong hugs Li Han and says he's really impressed by how smart Li Han is. Arlalong remarks that honestly, many noble children become disillusioned. He means that they are consumed by their ambitious dreams from a young age. But he finds it surprising that Li Han is already planning a more realistic ambition. Li Han believes that anyone would become more practical after experiencing life as a graduate student. He thinks that knights, the Adventure Guild, and even the Imperial family would welcome a strong mage at any time. The best magic academy in the empire, Einrogard, exists to train such talented individuals. Li Han plans to endure a few years of this. Arlalong expresses confidence that Li Han will succeed. He mentions that even the patriarch has praised Li Han's talent. Li Han recalls how Arlalong had prevented him from learning magic when he was young, citing its danger. Despite this, Li Han thanks Arlalong for everything. Arlalong is serious about what he's saying. He mentions that he can only accompany Li Han up to this point because they say no servants or horses can go beyond this place. Li Han acknowledges that this is what they've been told. As he looks ahead, he spots a carriage. A guard instructs everyone to move away from the carriage because it belongs to the Duke's daughter. Another guard emphasizes that it's a carriage for a prince. Li Han notices the large number of people protecting the carriage and questions whether all this security is necessary just to protect nobles. He thinks it might be excessive. When a noble boy approaches him, Li Han explains that Ein Rogard is a place he has to enter alone. However, the noble boy disagrees and starts trembling. He confesses that he can't sleep without his servants around and compares his servants to his hands and feet. The noble boy wonders, isn't it like cutting off his hands and feet before entering? Li Han understands the logic, but internally he is pretending to understand. The noble boy expresses his disbelief at how they could accept slaves just to achieve equality. He swears that he will complain about this matter in the name of his family. Li Han encourages him to do his best in addressing the issue. He wonders what might happen if the noble boy follows through with his complaint. Suddenly, a member of the academy staff uses mind magic on the noble boy, making him repeatedly say that he will reflect on himself. Li Han is surprised by this and questions whether they would use such magic on noble children without hesitation. Li Han realizes that the rumors he heard about the academy may not be untrue. He hears a voice mentioning that people say monsters stand in line at the academy, and if someone dies, they are buried in the mountain behind it. People say that everything in Einrogard is like an illusion, but they're just idiots. Li Han senses a tremendous magical pressure and wonders if the person causing it is the rumored headmaster of this place. Everyone present is being held back by the headmaster's power, unable to move at all. The headmaster's voice echoes again, mentioning that they were all likely instructed to come here without anything. However, he doesn't care about that. The headmaster says that even if they didn't plan to follow that rule, he would make sure they did. People start shouting as their belongings and servants are taken away. The headmaster scolds them, asking why they're standing around like idiots and urging them to move inside. He repeats his command forcefully. This marks the first day of Einrogard, the Empire's finest magic academy, and it seems like a foreboding start for the future. Someone calls Ironhead, and another person mentions that he's the heir of the Count. Then, a girl approaches Li Han and asks if he's Li Han from the Wardeness family. Li Han responds with a puzzled and she introduces herself as Yoner Maken, also from the Maken family like Li Han's Wardeness family. Li Han greets her and asks what's the matter. Yoner informs him that His Highness, the Prince, wishes to meet with Li Han. This surprises Li Han. He reflects on how networking and socializing are already intense on the first day at Einrogard, a place for developing talents and socializing. Li Han questions the use of the term prince. He recalls that the emperor has over 100 children, and if it's not the firstborn, their situation isn't much different from his own. Moreover, the emperor has stated that he won't support his children, making their situation even worse than Li Han's. In a place teeming with children from noble families, even that prince from the royal family seems to be in a less favorable position than Yoner from the Maken family. Li Han wonders why the prince would go to such lengths. Yoner asks if Li Han will go with them. While listening, Li Han hears someone questioning why one should take care of a prince they've never heard of or seen before. Li Han decides that it's better to make friends than enemies. So he tells Yoner that it's a good idea to at least get closer to someone. Yoner is grateful for Li Han's agreement as she has faced continuous rejections until now. The prince they're going to meet is the 97th prince, Gainando. Some people claim he's the 101st prince, but Gainando insists he's the 97th. Li Han is sure that Gainando doesn't want to be counted among the hundreds. Gainando asks Li Han if he's listening, and Li Han apologizes, asking what Gainando said. It becomes evident to Li Han that Gainando is quite immature. Li Han comments that the person who rejected Gainando's request probably doesn't realize how noble Gainando is. Gainando asks Li Han what noble means. Li Han thinks Gainando is not just immature, but an immature idiot. Li Han explains that noble means Gainando is valuable and has a high status. Gainando proudly agrees that the word suits him. Gainando continues, saying that the person who rejected his request is now talking to Ardnart, the 44th princess of the imperial family. Li Han notices that people are drawn to Ardnart because she displays the elegance of the imperial family, unlike a certain someone. Gainando asks Li Han if he can confront that person later. He compliments Li Han for being tall and well-built. Li Han advises Gainando that noble people don't bully others. Gainando argues that he's not bullying, just. Li Han interrupts and reminds Gainando that noble people don't engage in such behavior. Gainando asks what he should do then. Li Han suggests that Gainando should either forgive that person gracefully or, if he doesn't want to do that, challenge them to a duel personally. Gainando is surprised and asks if he really needs to go that far. He decides that, as a noble prince, he will choose to forgive. Yeoner approaches Li Han and compliments him for his patience, saying that even she, a relative, can't stand Gainando's stubbornness. Li Han humbly responds that calling him amazing is an exaggeration. He then asks Yeoner why she's looking after Gainando when he's a relative. Yeoner hesitates to answer, but before she can, the headmaster suddenly appears and addresses them as Ironheads. Someone mentions that it's the lich they saw at the school gate. Li Han is surprised to learn that the principal is a lich, an undead mage who overcame death. The lich informs them that he has a question to ask. The lich asks why they think he calls them Ironheads. Ardnart responds that it's because the symbol for freshmen is steel. The lich praises her answer and awards her dormitory 10 points. Ardnart is surprised and asks if there's a point system for the dormitories. The lich chuckles and explains that there isn't, but if they want to become mages, they should learn how to see through lies. The lich clarifies that the freshman's symbol is actually iron. He emphasizes that the quality of steel depends on how it's treated and that it's a versatile and valuable material. It suits all of them. Everyone understands his point. The lich playfully says they fell for his trick once again and reveals that he calls them Ironheads because there's supposedly nothing in their brains. Li Han notices that no one dares to challenge the lich's teasing remarks. He also realizes that it's challenging to move around in this magical environment with such high power density. However, he believes that it will become easier with time and adaptation. The lich asks if he only used harsh words with the young future leaders of the empire who have traveled a long way. He notices someone moving in the dense atmosphere. The lich instructs everyone to head toward the left door, where a grand feast awaits them. He encourages them to enjoy this meal and hopes it will help them recover from their tiring journey. Gainando's eyes light up with excitement, agreeing enthusiastically. Someone asks if this is all a joke. They see a variety of delicious dishes, from cheesy buttered bread to chicken coated in oil, butter, and seasoned flour, braised in wine, grated and soaked in bechamel sauce, and freshly grilled fish prepared in an oriental style. Gainando expresses his thanks for the meal and begins to eat, but suddenly the food vanishes. The lich bursts into laughter and calls them all foolish children who fell for his trick once again. The lich wonders when they will start paying attention. Li Han had heard that becoming a lich involves losing something, and he's sure that the school's skull principal lost quite a bit. The lich explains that this academy is where mages are born, and the most important thing for mages to develop properly is yearning. Everyone asks what that means. They are given uniforms and average food, and Gainando complains that it's not enough. The lich agrees and says that's the reaction he wants. He asks if the food isn't delicious, and then he tells them they should learn magic and create delicious food themselves. This surprises everyone. The lich questions if their current clothes and wands are subpar, and he explains that they can improve their wands and get new clothes through magic. This is the rule of this magical world. The lich explains that this academy is like a nursery for mages, and the strongest force that helps mages grow is desire. All the children are surprised by what they're hearing. Someone thinks about contacting someone outside the academy to get what they need, but the lich says that reaction is also what he expected. The lich informs them that first-year students are not allowed to leave the school grounds, and they can't ask their seniors for help either. That's the rule. The lich wishes them luck and calls them steelheads, telling them to become good mages. Li Han thinks that every school has strange professors like this one, and he's familiar with that type. He remembers a next-door lab professor from his past life who had a similar look in their eyes. Gainando approaches Li Han and asks if he heard what the Lich said too. Gainando asks how they could be treated in such a way. Li Han suggests that maybe the Lich is better than the next-door lab professor. Gainando wonders how they are supposed to live with such low-quality food and clothing. Li Han points out that if they are provided with food and clothing, this place is actually better than expected. Gainando is surprised and asks what Li Han means. The Wardeness family is not well known in noble society because they focused on magic research instead of social life. This led to misunderstandings about the family. Gainando realizes that even his family's maids don't get such food and clothes. He wonders what kind of life Li Han has been living. Gainando invites Li Han to visit his house sometime. Li Han is a bit surprised but agrees and says thank you. He asks Gainando if they should go to the dormitories now. Einrogard accepted any student with talent, regardless of their social status. However, to avoid conflicts among sensitive teenagers, the dormitories were divided into 4 based on social status. The vainglorious Blue Dragon Tower. This tower is reserved for those with noble dragon blood, including the royal family and highly respected nobles like Li Han. The externally burning Phoenix Tower. Only those who have devoted themselves to the divine flame are allowed here. It's a solemn place for disciples from various religious orders. The lightning-biting White Tiger's Tower. This tower is for those with the ferocity to confront any challenge. It houses the bloodline of knight families who are ready to follow the path of both knights and mages. The omniscient Black Turtle's Tower. This dormitory is for individuals with great patience. It accommodates various people, including peasants, servants, slaves, clowns, homeless individuals, merchants, and newly rising low nobles. They hold lower social status compared to the other dormitories, making them susceptible to discrimination. Because of this division, the new students are feeling disheartened. However, there are a few exceptions to this strict division. Li Han sees these exceptions as potential business partners. He believes that becoming friends with them will be beneficial because making money through business is the best way. Practical experience in business can help one improve their skills. But then, someone starts mocking these exceptions, questioning if it is necessary to admit such individuals. This comment catches everyone's attention. The boy who makes the remark asks why everyone is staring at him and if he has said something wrong. Li Han can't tolerate this boy speaking negatively about his future business partners. He tells the boy that he is the one being indecent. Li Han reminds the boy that they have all left behind their everything to come here. He asks if the boy has forgotten that and is now acting proud. Li Han can't stand someone disrespecting his future partners, and others in the group begin to agree with him. They're wondering if Li Han is from the Wardeness family, a powerful noble family. Some are impressed, thinking he must be a great noble. That boy is curious about why everyone is reacting this way. Li Han is amused by the atmosphere and thinks it's time to introduce himself. However, people start avoiding eye contact with him as they've heard that the Wardeness family is dangerous. They even believe they have a dragon as their family's leader. Someone mentions rumors of the Wardeness having an ancient spirit's bloodline. Li Han is puzzled by their reactions and asks Yoner if he looks scary. Yoner reassures him, saying he doesn't look scary at all and appears noble. Li Han is still unaware of his family's infamous reputation. Gainando interrupts them, wondering why they left a prince alone. Yoner apologizes to Gainando. Li Han asks Yoner if she can continue their earlier conversation. Yoner asks is Li Han curious why she puts up with Gainando's complaints and explains it's because of Gainando's mother. Li Han begins to wonder if Yoner's situation is related to her family background. He imagines a scenario where Yoner might have attended a palace banquet and accidentally spilled her drink on the Empress's dress. In his imagination, Yoner must have been terrified, thinking that her family would face serious consequences for her mistake. However, to her surprise, the Empress was forgiving and reassured Yoner that it was okay. Yoner confirms that such an incident didn't really happen, and she goes on to explain that Gainando's mother is incredibly wealthy. In fact, she gave Yoner a substantial allowance just for being friends with Gainando. Lee Han realizes that he should also befriend Gainando to enjoy similar benefits. As they admire the size of the school building, Gainando comments on its grandeur, and Lee Han observes that the school campus offers a wide range of amenities, including a lake and a forest. This makes him realize that the Lich was serious when he said they would have to obtain things for themselves. Yoner expresses her confusion, mentioning that she believed this path would lead them to the Blue Dragon's Tower. Lee Han asks Yoner what's happening, and she admits she doesn't know and wonders if this is the way to their dormitory. Lee Han is equally puzzled by everyone's behavior when suddenly something unexpected occurs, leaving everyone in a state of shock and surprise. Everyone is puzzled and wonders what this small and unimpressive building is. Gainando compares it to their servants' quarters, remarking that it's even smaller than that. He expresses his disappointment, questioning if they really have to live in such a place. Lee Han doesn't share in the disappointment and realizes that it might be challenging to accommodate everyone in this building. Suddenly, everyone around him disappears, leaving Lee Han confused and wondering what's happening. Then, he hears a voice welcoming him as a young mage and asking him where he'd like to go. Lee Han is impressed by how this magical academy operates, realizing that the dormitory they're in is actually a magic tower. Lee Han inquires about the places he can visit, and the voice explains that for now, he can only access his room and the common room for freshman steel mages. Lee Han asks if he can go to other places later, and the voice confirms that he can, as long as he knows their names. Lee Han learns that he'll need to know specific things to go to certain places within the academy. However, the voice informs him that he can't do that right now because the headmaster has prohibited it. Lee Han then asks the voice to guide him to his room, and it agrees, welcoming him to the academy as a young mage. In his room, Lee Han discovers that there's only one mandatory subject at Ein Rogard, which is about Ein Rogard. All other subjects are optional, and students can choose them after attending for the first month. Lee Han also finds out that the headmaster's name is O Suganadaltes. Lee Han realizes that the academy isn't as strict as he initially thought, and it seems more relaxed compared to graduate school. He finds that his room is well equipped, which surprises him, while others think there's nothing in their room. Lee Han decides to familiarize himself with the rules and considers finding out which classes other students plan to register for. In the common room, Yoner tells Lee Han that she wants to learn alchemy because she's been interested in it for a while. She dreams of opening her own workshop and supplying products to the Imperial Palace. Lee Han thinks it's a great idea. Yoner asks if he wants to join her in this endeavor, but Lee Han says running an alchemy business is difficult and he needs to think about it. He explains that in the Empire, running an alchemy business is tough because there's competition, spreading rumors about rivals, and monopolizing potion ingredients. Many guilds are fighting over the market share. Lee Han believes that something more stable might be a better choice. Yoner then asks Lee Han about the subjects he's interested in. Lee Han considers taking subjects with less competition and easy grading. His first goal is to study Imperial Palace Management and become a civil servant. He believes that qualifications and experience matter more than just studying, but he doesn't want to discourage Yoner, who is passionate about alchemy. So, Lee Han decides to choose his subjects carefully instead of making hasty decisions. Gainando rushes over to them and informs them that something bad has happened. He believes someone broke into his room, and it's completely empty. Yoner and Lee Han remain silent, and Gainando says he was robbed. Yoner and Lee Han reluctantly agree. The next day, Lee Han discovers that understanding the basics of magic is a mandatory subject, and class schedules vary depending on the dormitory. However, Lee Han notices that everyone seems to be in poor condition. Yoner explains that they are all hungry and couldn't sleep well because their beds were uncomfortable. Lee Han wonders if it's really that bad. In comparison to his previous life, he recalls asking his senior if they didn't have any breaks in their timetable. His senior gave him an energy bar and said it was today's meal, so he should eat it throughout the day. Sunbae told Lee Han not to look at him like that because he has to eat the energy bar too. Sunbae added that after their schedule is over, they'll have a sumptuous feast. Li Han jokingly threatened to kill him if it's just ramen. However, later, he received cup noodles and even triangle kimbap, which Li Han found quite satisfying. He realizes that this magic academy is better than he expected. When they arrive outside their classroom, a girl expresses relief that it's on the first floor. However, when they look inside, they are shocked. They wonder what they are seeing. It is indeed the correct classroom, but there is a troll inside. Trolls are known to be ferocious and tyrannical monsters that nobles fear. Yet, here is a troll wearing clean clothes and standing in a classroom. The troll informs the students that they have found the right classroom and should take their seats quickly. She introduces herself as Gracia Kim, a half-troll. Gracia assures them that there is no need to be scared because she doesn't eat people, unless she's very hungry, of course. Students start to wonder if Gracia actually eats humans when she's hungry. Gracia, sensing their unease, realizes she shouldn't have made that joke. She asks if they are ready to begin the lecture. Gracia demonstrates some magic tricks and explains that most of these skills won't be used because magic is very dangerous, and they won't be able to use these magic tricks until they become adults. However, she emphasizes that they are all potential mages nicknamed Steel. Gracia informs them that the lecture is meant to teach them what magic is and help them find the type of magic that suits them best, as the mage's journey is a perilous one. She assures them that she will be their compass through this journey. Li Han realizes that not all professors are like the Lich principal. Gracia then asks them to start with the basics and inquires, "What is magic?" A girl answers, saying that a mage is someone who changes the world with their will. Gracia appreciates the response and adds to it. Gracia explains that magic is about borrowing power from the origins that can change the world, which includes both magic power and mana power. Everyone in this place should be able to feel these powers and be aware of them. However, performing magic requires more than just awareness. It involves gathering magic power through one's own will, skillfully combining them, and achieving the desired results. Gracia notes that while magic often involves incantations, specific movements, or regions, what's truly essential is one's own determination. She reminds them not to forget this important aspect. Gracia realizes she might have spoken for too long and suggests they try it out themselves. She asks everyone to stand up and take out their staffs to gather their magic power. Li Han realizes that he's finally going to try using magic. Gracia instructs them to maintain their magic power and visualize an image of light. This task proves challenging for Yoner, who struggles to control her magic power. It feels like trying to rein in a wild horse, and she fears being thrown off if she loses focus for even a moment. Gracia tells them to concentrate and control their magic power. She then instructs them to shout the incantation while doing so. Gracia demonstrates by shouting light and using magic to produce light. She mentions that it doesn't matter which incantation they use, but a short one might help them stay focused. Gracia explains the process. First, gather magic power, then use their will to control it, and finally, shout the incantation. Li Han thinks he understands, but he knows it won't work perfectly right away. Suddenly, Gainando generates a large amount of magic power, and it starts moving on its own. He's puzzled by this occurrence. Gracia steps in and stops Gainando's magic using her own magic, cautioning him that if he can't control it, his magic power might become uncontrollable and harm him. She reassures the students that it's her responsibility as a professor to prevent such accidents and encourages them to practice with peace of mind. Gracia encourages Gainando not to be scared and to keep trying as long as he has magic power left. On his second attempt, Gainando's magic doesn't work. Gracia notices that 1/3 of the students have given up, while 2/3 remain. Illuminate is a simple magic spell, but it usually takes at least a month of practice to master. This is something the students will need to discover through their own experiences, and Gracia can't just explain it to them. She asks the students to try again. On the third try, half of them give up, leaving only half still trying. By the fourth try, most students have given up, with only 3 remaining. On the fifth try, only 1 student is left. On the 6th try, there is still one student trying. And on the 7th try, Li Han raises his hand and apologizes for interrupting the professor, but asks if he can continue. Li Han points out that he seems to be the only one still making an effort. Gracia is surprised that Li Han has tried 7 times, considering that even students with a lot of magic power usually run out of it by the 5th try. Gracia explains that different cultures have different names for magic power, like energy in certain Eastern tribes, aether for scholars who like to sound sophisticated, or divine power for stubborn priests. It's the source of power for mages, and it has many names. When mages use magic, they use up this power. Young mages often face the problem of running out of this power because they don't know how to use it efficiently. However, Li Han is fine even after trying 7 times. He also used his own name instead of his family name, which made his professor like him because the school practices equality. Gracia asks Li Han to come forward. He goes to her. Gracia asks him to give her his hand. Li Han puts his hand in Gracia's hand, and she gets lost in a magical density. Li Han brings her back to reality and asks if there's a problem. Gracia says no, everything is fine, and she suggests they continue the lesson. Gainando asks Yoner if they shouldn't save Li Han in case Gracia eats him. Yoner tells Gainando to be quiet and not to be an idiot. Gracia asks Li Han to come and see her after school, and he agrees. She tells everyone that using magic power is easy despite their magic power. She assures them that they don't need to worry about it. Gracia explains that they will get better with practice, and they will learn to use less magic power. She warns them not to practice too much, or they might hurt themselves, especially Gainando. Gainando apologizes, and Gracia reassures him that she doesn't eat students. After the lecture, Li Han goes to see Gracia in her office and asks why she wanted to meet alone. Gracia tells him that she has already heard about him from the headmaster. Li Han wonders that she heard from that crazy lich. Gracia is telling Li Han not to worry. She explains that even though the headmaster may seem a bit strange, he is actually a kind-hearted person. Gracia mentions that the students may not know this, but the headmaster is very observant and would inform all the professors about the new students. Then, Lich shares his thoughts about a couple of people. He advises being cautious around a person who looks like a troublemaker. He thinks this person might cause problems in the dormitories. Lich also warns about another person, saying she's a bit tricky when it comes to using holy magic. Finally, this year, Lich mentioned something about Li Han. He said that Li Han has a lot of foolishness. Gracia interprets this as meaning that Li Han is not very smart. However, there's a famous saying in the East that great folly also means great wisdom. It suggests that someone who appears very foolish might actually be quite wise. Gracia thinks that Lich might have meant that Li Han has the potential to succeed in a big way. Gracia is really curious about what kind of student Li Han is. She thinks that Li Han has great potential. Li Han asks her what she means by that. Gracia feels that she can't just tell him plainly. Gracia explains that the reason she wanted to meet Li Han in person is because he has a lot of mana. Li Han understands and says, "Ah, I see." He wonders why she needed to meet him in person just for this information. Gracia clarifies that it's not just a lot amount of mana, it's so much that she can't even estimate how much he has. Having a lot of mana is a special talent for a mage. If someone doesn't have enough mana, they have to go through a lot of trouble to increase it. But if you have a lot from the start, you can relax and not worry about it. It's an amazing talent. Li Han realizes that if what Gracia says is true, then things will be much easier for him in the future. But Gracia says, "How unfortunate." Li Han asks her why it's unfortunate and isn't having a lot of mana a good thing. Gracia explains that usually having a lot of mana is a good thing, like having control over a small cup of water. But having an excessive amount of mana, like a vast sea, can make it very hard to control. Li Han understands that this means he is having a tough time controlling his mana, which is crucial for a mage. He starts to worry. To help him, Gracia gives Li Han a bracelet. Li Han asks what it is for, and Gracia tells him It's a bracelet that can absorb mana. It will assist him for now. Li Han is relieved and thanks his professor. However, Gracia makes it clear that things aren't that simple, and that's why she called him here. Li Han asks if she has any other advice. Gracia suggests that Li Han should practice using a variety of magic skills to use up some of his excess mana. She assures him that he can practice alone, as there won't be a risk of running out of mana. Li Han thanks Gracia with a laugh, but secretly feels like he doesn't need any special advantages. He sighs because he's worried about his future. Li Han decides that he must do well academically from the first year onwards. Then, Li Han asks Gaynando and Yoner if they have any classes they'd like to take. Yoner enthusiastically says she wants to take alchemy. She invites them to join her in taking alchemy classes. Gaynando, on the other hand, thinks it's a strange choice and says that alchemy is for servants. He questions if there's anything useful to learn in alchemy. Yoner asks Li Han to step aside, and then she punches Gaynando hard, warning him not to go to the infirmary for potions. Li Han, who knows about fighting because he was taught swordsmanship by Arlalong, recognizes that Yoner's punch was quite impressive. In the basic alchemy understanding class during the lesson, Li Han questions Yoner if it's okay to hit Gaynando like that. Yoner responds that it'll be fine if she apologizes tomorrow. Li Han thinks Yoner might have done this before. Li Han notices that there are many students from different towers in the class. He observes that there are quite a few students from the Black Turtle's tower. Li Han doesn't pay much attention to them, but he's bothered by the way they stare at him. When commoners meet nobles, there are usually two reactions. They either become scared and avoid them or show hostility towards the nobles. Li Han worries that trying to act friendly with them might not go well. A professor arrives and asks if everyone is present. Li Han wonders if this is the professor. Considering they already have a lich as their grandmaster and a professor who is a troll of mixed blood, having another professor should not be surprising. However, this new professor is just a regular dwarf. The dwarf professor introduces himself as Uregolum Jundar and tells them they can simply call him Professor Uregolum. The professor begins by asking why they're all gathered on the field without desks when there is a cool building nearby. A girl raises her hand and suggests that it's for them to connect with the natural mana, which is important for alchemists to understand the power of nature. The professor seems puzzled, and the girl asks if that is not the reason. Yoner turns to Li Han and asks for his opinion. Li Han isn't entirely sure, but he decides to answer the professor. He suggests that maybe it is because the field is a good place to gather materials. The professor agrees with this answer and playfully calls Li Han an idiot. He clarifies that he meant Li Han is a new student who uses his brain, and he appreciates his response. The girl who initially answered the question is not happy that Li Han's answer is being praised. Li Han wishes that the professor would stop unintentionally making rivals for him, even though his thoughtless answer happened to be correct. The professor then tells everyone to pay attention and explains the true reason he brought them all here. He says that most of them probably already have an idea of what is needed for alchemy, like exceptional talent and precise mana control. However, the professor reveals that this is quite far from the truth. He emphasizes that what an alchemist needs the most is the ability to gather materials. Princess Adrenart raises her hand and suggests that materials can either be grown or bought. She thinks it's a bit extreme to say that the most important skill is gathering materials. Other students agree and start whispering, questioning the need for gathering materials. The professor realizes that Princess Adrenart might not understand the practical aspects of alchemy. He explains that only about 10% of materials can be personally grown, and not all the purchased materials are suitable because adventurers often mishandle medicinal herbs when collecting them. He emphasizes that an alchemist must know how to gather their own materials, or they won't succeed. The professor concludes the explanation and announces that it's time for a practical exercise. The professor shows them a herb and instructs everyone to find this material called the Doko herb, which is used in making antidotes. Li Han makes a note of it. He asks Yoner if she has any experience using it, and Yoner says she used it before entering the academy. Lee Han starts thinking about the academy and its reputation for dangerous rumors, like students dying while learning magic. He wonders if this place is safe for kids. Lee Han also believes it's risky to move around in pairs and suggests they should have at least 3 people together. Yoner asks if there's anyone from their tower, and Lee Han mentions Princess Adrenart. Yoner asks if Lee Han finds the princess approachable, and he replies that they are only looking for a medicinal herb. Yoner points to the princess and notes that it might already be too late, as it seems like everyone has already formed teams. Lee Han is surprised to see that students from the Black Turtle Tower are also here, but they seem to be avoiding him. Yoner explains that it's because Princess Adrenart was already famous before coming here. She is known for her exceptional intelligence and talent, and people from all backgrounds admire her. Lee Han asks if Gainando had no one to team up with. Meanwhile, Gainando in his room feels his ears itch as if someone is talking negatively about him. When people say bad things about you, your ears itch. Yoner confirms that Gainando indeed had nothing. Lee Han realizes that everyone has already formed teams and that only students from the Black Turtle Tower are left. He knows it's risky to go alone, so he looks for someone who can complement their skills. He notices a girl, Milia, from the Black Turtle Tower. Milia is a dark elf from the Shadow Patrol in the northern part of the Empire, a skilled group of hunters and scouts who are experts in the northern mountains. Milia asks Lee Han what's going on and mentions that it doesn't seem difficult. She hasn't heard of the Doko herb before, but she believes it won't be hard to find because the forest is like her playground. Milia was initially surprised to see so many talented new students at the school, but she wonders if this is her time to shine. Yoner and Lee Han approach Milia, and Yoner introduces herself as Yoner from the Makin family. Lee Han also introduces himself and mentions that they'll be relying on Milia. Milia notices that the girl is from a noble family, but she's unsure about the guy, Lee Han. Milia asks them what they want, and Yoner proposes moving around together. Milia asks them what their intentions are and clenches her fist, thinking that all nobles are the same. She believes they often complain about not being treated well enough, even when they are treated with respect. Milia wonders if there's really any difference between Yoner and Lee Han. Lee Han expresses concern, telling Milia that it's risky to go alone, especially in case they encounter a monster. He asks her what she'll do if that happens. Milia insists that she doesn't need their help. Lee Han asks why she feels that way, assuring her that they don't intend to use her as bait or abandon her. Milia is surprised that Lee Han seemed to understand her thoughts. Lee Han points out the challenges of going into the forest alone, like collecting and carrying the herb. He emphasizes that it's not practical to do everything alone. Milia tells him to be quiet and asks if they're going together. Lee Han says he doesn't know and teases Milia for being smart. Yoner is curious about what the Wardeness family taught Lee Han, and Lee Han finally agrees to go together with Milia and says let's go. Milia tosses away a wooden stick and takes off quickly. Yoner watches her and comments that she's a very skilled hunter. Yoner then asks Lee Han how he knew about Milia's skills. Lee Han explains that he noticed the well-developed muscles in Milia's legs and calves, along with the calluses on her palms. He figured she probably uses a bow and arrow frequently, which are traits of an experienced hunter. Milia is surprised that Lee Han could deduce all that just from those observations and thinks he has a strange vibe about him, almost like he can read people's memories. Lee Han tells Yoner that he's just joking and points out the symbol of the Shadow Patrol on Milia's wrist. He then asks Milia if she was listening. Milia admits that she wasn't. Yoner suggests they go together and match their pace. Milia questions why she should do that, and Lee Han mentions that only Yoner can identify the herb they're looking for. Lee Han asks Milia if they would be able to find the herb if Yoner were to collapse. Milia is left without words and asks Lee Han what his role is. Milia insists that Yoner's task is to locate the herb, she's the guide, and Lee Han isn't contributing anything. Lee Han is afraid that Milia might get angry if he says he's just along for the ride, so he tells her that his role is to protect both of them. Nilia, observing Li Han's physique, guesses that he comes from a family of knights. She wonders why he's in the Blue Tower. Li Han clarifies that he's not from a knight family, but from the Wardeness family. Li Han sees this as an opportunity to get closer to Nilia, but she is surprised at the mention of the Wardeness family. Nilia questions Li Han about his affiliation with the Wardeness family and asks what's the big deal about it. Li Han turns to Yoner and inquires if there's something wrong with his family. Yoner explains that it's quite common for there to be wild rumors about famous noble families. However, the Wardeness family has some exceptionally bizarre ones. Li Han is curious and asks what these rumors are. Yoner reveals that some of the rumors include the patriarch of the Wardeness family being a dragon who used his breath to burn all the undead during an undead frenzy incident. They also say that the Wardeness family has made contracts with ancient spirits, which made them skilled in magic but stripped them of their emotions. The Wardeness family is known for being ruthless, and there are stories of a Wardeness mage causing the destruction of an entire city during a riot. Li Han is taken aback and remarks that these rumors make it seem like the Wardeness family is a terrifying force that destroys everything whenever something happens. Li Han asks if in case of a major incident, Grand Mages would naturally have to intervene, right? Yoner agrees and reassures Li Han not to worry too much about those rumors. Nilia thinks that she doesn't know about other rumors, but it's clear that Yoner and Li Han are not emotionless. She tells them to stop complaining and suggests they continue walking. Li Han agrees. However, Nilia suddenly notices something and quickly gets down on the ground, asking Li Han and Yoner to look over in a certain direction. She points out some large footprints, noting that something big had passed through the area. Nilia adds that the footprints are shallow, indicating that whatever it was trying not to leave a noticeable trail. She's curious to find out what it could be and speculates that it must be well-trained. Yoner isn't particularly interested but tries to respond positively. Nilia realizes that she went on a tangent by herself again, but thinks she needs to get used to it. She assures them that it's okay and doubts that anyone outside of the village would be interested in such things. Li Han finds Nilia's discovery interesting and asks if she knows more about it. Nilia is surprised by his curiosity and asks if he genuinely finds it interesting. Li Han responds that he indeed does and wonders why it can't be interesting to him. Nilia explains that Li Han comes from a prestigious family, and this topic is about the wilderness. Anyway, she suggests that he should be careful if he spots such things. She mentions that not only are there large footprints, but it's also hard to predict what else might appear in this area. Nilia mentions hearing about various monsters lurking within the Magic Academy. Yoner agrees and adds that Ein Rogard, being a place filled with mana, naturally attracts many monsters. Some of them are the result of experiments, while others are rare slimes created from discarded magic potions. Li Han starts to feel uneasy, realizing that this place doesn't seem very safe. Nilia suggests changing their plan and following the tracks they'd found. This way, they can lower the chances of getting ambushed. Li Han asks Nilia if he can learn how to read these tracks by himself. Nilia warns him that it won't be easy, and he might give up halfway. Li Han is determined and promises to do his best if Nilia teaches him. They begin their search, and after some time, they finally locate the Doko herb. Yoner comments that it's a shame there are only 2, but she believes they'll find the rest soon. She suggests moving to another location since she doesn't see any more herbs here. Yoner notices that Li Han and Nilia are quiet. When Yoner turns around, she realizes there's a massive monster behind her. Li Han points out that since this monster can detect mana, it's not an ordinary boar. Nilia warns everyone to be careful because this creature is essentially a monster. Li Han realizes that the situation is getting too dangerous. Since he doesn't have any other weapons, he decides to use his magic staff. The magic staff can change its size based on the user's desire, so Li Han makes it larger. Nilia recognizes that Li Han is from the famous mage family, Wardeness, which is known as the Empire's Grand Mage family. She speculates that Li Han might have learned some magic even before coming to the academy. Nilia asks Li Han if he's confident in it. Li Han replies, "Probably." Nilia suggests that if Li Han fails, he should carry redhead Yoner and run away, while she lures the monster away. Yoner is surprised and asks why Nilia is going to such lengths to protect them. Nilia explains that she's doing it because only she can. Li Han thanks Nilia and says he will rely on her if that happens. Nilia wonders what kind of magic Li Han from the Wardeness family will use to defeat the boar. When Li Han was just 10 years old, he learned that while swords were considered the best weapons, one must also know how to control various weapons for different situations. Only those who undergo this process and attain a level of enlightenment can condense their mana into a weapon, reaching the level of aura. Li Han's mentor, Arlalong, believed that very few individuals would ever reach this level, and if Li Han knew the truth, he might be disappointed. However, Li Han had different goals. He didn't see the need to learn aura and simply wanted to become a mage and live a peaceful life in an office. He believed that training his own body to protect himself would be sufficient. Arlalong recognized that Li Han was unlike nobles who only dreamt of grand delusional ambitions. Arlalong promised to help Li Han reach the level of an aura user and assigned him an additional 100 repetitions of stabbing practice. In the present, Li Han stabs the monster with his staff right in its mouth, causing the monster to fall dead. Yoner and Nilia are surprised that Li Han used a staff to attack instead of magic, and they wonder where the magic is. The staff from Ein Rogard is quite strong and can be used in physical fights. However, it's still not enough to defeat a monster like the one they encountered. The only reason Li Han managed to defeat it was because he unconsciously used mana, even though it's not as advanced as using aura. This change in him happened so he could survive in this dangerous place. Nilia acknowledges that Li Han killed the monster, and Yoner questions if this is how their class should be. She can't believe they allowed new students to enter such a perilous environment. Suddenly, they hear another sound, and Li Han suggests that there might be another monster. Yoner wonders if she should drop this class, but Nilia disagrees and advises her not to do that. Nilia goes to check and sees a group of students dealing with a monster. Li Han suggests that since there are many people, they should observe them first. Nilia believes the group can handle it on their own. A boy named Ashan Dalkard steps forward, and Yoner recognizes him as being from the Dalkard family, a well-known family with exceptional abilities in resolving matters. While the Wardeness family has been advisors to the Emperor for generations, the Dalkard family is primarily in charge of finances. Li Han thinks that if Ashan is from the Dalkard family, he should be trustworthy. He also notices that Ashan appears to have learned swordsmanship. Ashan confidently claims that he can predict all of the boar's movements and assures that it won't escape his predictions. However, when Ashan attacks the boar easily throws him aside. The boar then approaches two frightened students, causing them to become scared. However, Princess Ardnart steps forward to protect these girls. Yoner asks Li Han what he plans to do, but Li Han remains silent. Meanwhile, the princess believes that everything must go perfectly, just as it always has. She decides to read the boar's breathing and prepare for its charge. However, when the boar attacks the princess, she is puzzled. Surprisingly, the boar falls to the ground instead. Li Han remarks that fortunately, the boar didn't notice them. Nilia asks Li Han if he now understands how important it is to approach while riding the headwind. Li Han tells Nilia that he will rely on her for more advice in the future. The princess realizes that the person who helped her is Li Han Wardeness and thanks him. Li Han tells her there's no need to worry about it. Nilia questions why Li Han and the princess are speaking so formally, as it's normal to talk casually to students in the same year. Yoner suggests they might have gotten carried away by the atmosphere. The princess tells Li Han that she will surely repay him for his help today. Li Han asks if he can request a favor in return. The princess encourages him to go ahead and ask, wondering what he wants. Li Han then asks the princess if she could tell him about classes where it's easy to get good grades. This request surprises the princess, and she wonders why a member of the Wardeness family would want to find an easy way to get good grades. She questions if Li Han is testing her. Li Han insists that she must know what's easy, and the princess contemplates his request. Meanwhile, Professor Duragla mentions that he knows of such classes and knows them better than anyone else. Li Han suddenly experiences a sense of foreboding, a feeling he's encountered before. The professor reveals that the alchemy class is one such class where it's easy to get good results. This revelation feels eerily familiar to Li Han, reminding him of the class where he met his graduate school professor in his past life. Li Han tells himself that he needs to stay calm. He's no longer an inexperienced student like he used to be. Li Han expresses his belief that passion and love can make anything possible. The professor acknowledges that he expected Li Han to think that way and says he will help him cultivate that passion and love. Li Han mentions that he still wants to explore other classes. Some students begin to talk, unimpressed that a professor is already showing interest in Li Han due to his wardness family background. Li Han thinks there's no need for jealousy over something like that. The professor announces that today's class will end here. He explains that unfortunately, the other groups that went to different places didn't encounter these boars. Ashan questions if the professor intentionally led them to face these boars. The professor asks Ashan if he thinks he only wanted them to search for herbs. The professor tells the objective for the day, explaining that they should experience different situations while searching for herbs. He stresses the importance of alchemists being ready to handle various scenarios, whether it involves combat, evasion, escape, or hide. He asks the students if they understand this. Yoner questions, does he not need the doko herb then? They worked hard to find as a group. The professor is taken aback by their success and acknowledges their skill as he wasn't expecting them to find it. Professor tells them they have passed the test. He recognizes them as talented students who belong in this class. The professor then urges Li Han to join the class, emphasizing the importance of it. Li Han begins to realize the gravity of the situation he's in. Li Han tells his professor that he will do his best to join the class. He shares that learning alchemy was his dream. Li Han has come to terms with the reality of his situation. The professor notices that Li Han has matured in certain ways, which is unusual for someone his age who might typically be rebellious. A monster approaches Li Han and informs him that, since he killed the boar and obtained the doko herb, the professor will grant him a special privilege. Li Han is intrigued and asks about this special privilege. The professor explains that he has a cabin near the forest and will allow Li Han to visit it whenever he wishes during the semester. Li Han is shocked and wonders what kind of tasks the professor will assign to him there. The professor clarifies that he didn't explain clearly and asks Li Han what he thinks new students want the most. He reveals that it's food, and although Li Han may not be looking forward to it right now, he will likely come to appreciate it after a week. Li Han thinks it's really difficult to survive on the food provided by the academy, especially since all the noble children are in his tower. But the professor says that his cabin is stocked with fresh ingredients, including spices and vegetables he gathered from the forest himself. Li Han realizes that this means he has access to an unlimited buffet. Li Han expresses his newfound love for the subject of alchemy. The professor tells him that he's starting to like Li Han more and more. Meanwhile, some other students are angry that the professor unleashed the boar like that and swear they won't attend this class again. They thought they were going to die in the forest. Li Han contemplates the most urgent method, which is to set aside rations. While he did learn from Arlalong how to dismember an animal, he's not sure if he can do it alone. Yoner offers to help him out. Li Han expresses concern about Yoner's condition, but she reassures him and asks if she can have some meat in return for her help. Nilia questions their decision to dismember the animal, considering that nobles usually lack experience in such tasks. Li Han argues that they can enjoy the meat from it. Nilia, confident in her hunting skills, decides to demonstrate them, while Yoner hails from a family familiar with handling materials. Li Han believes that, with their assistance, they can successfully complete the task. The professor provides them with the necessary equipment and Li Han expresses his gratitude. They commence the process, and Nilia notes that Li Han is performing better than expected. She wonders if the Wardeness family teaches even these types of tasks. Li Han elaborates on the process, explaining that after removing the skin, they'll separate the lean meat and hang it on wooden branches. He suggests that instead of discarding the intestines, they use them to make sausages. Li Han considers that they should preserve the meat for as long as possible. The professor inquires if he's smoking the meat, and Li Han confirms it, explaining that smoking helps prevent it from spoiling. The professor acknowledges that even in cool weather, meat will eventually spoil, so smoking it is the best choice. He is surprised that Li Han, who has only been at school for 3 days, is already smoking meat. This exceeds the professor's expectations. Li Han asks the professor if he's hungry, to which the professor admits he is. Li Han then requests some bread and butter from the professor, who remarks that they're trying to maximize their resources. They prepare the meal together, and the professor provides jam as a gift. As they all start eating, Yoner compliments the delicious jam. The professor encourages them to eat as much as they want since they won't have it readily available. While he doesn't know why Li Han used it on the meat, he finds the texture heavenly. They enjoyed a delicious meal of well-cooked meat, sweet jam, and bread with tasty butter by a flowing spring. Despite the challenges of their first 3 days at school, they were able to savor good food and each other's company today. Yoner remarks that there's still plenty of meat left after smoking it all. Li Han mentions he can't eat anymore. Nilia suggests sharing the surplus with other students from their tower. Li Han thinks Nilia wants to sell the meat, and Yoner agrees, considering it a good idea. Nilia is surprised because she didn't say that. Li Han explains that most students in the Blue Dragon Tower are rich, so giving things for free might make them feel embarrassed. Nilia thinks is that how nobles are. Nilia observes that Li Han and Yoner are both unusual in their own ways, but she doesn't know the details about them yet. Nilia wonders if they're really going to sell the meat for money. Li Han asks if she wants to join in. Nilia clarifies that she wants to give it as a gift to her friends. Li Han tells her it's her choice, but she might regret it. Yoner adds that while friendships can fade, wealth remains. Nilia asks them both to be quiet. Meanwhile, Professor observes that all 3 of them are passionate and talented students, but also seem like troublemakers. He realizes he might have many headaches dealing with them in the future. The Blue Dragon Tower is far from the main school area. Normally, the fresh forest air welcomes new students, but today is different. Students notice a strange smell. Li Han and Yoner are cooking meat and ask if anyone is hungry. Students are curious about what they're doing. Li Han invites them to sit down and says they have food for everyone. Students' eyes light up, and they ask if it's true. Li Han explains that it will cost 2 silver coins per person. As the students eat the meat, their eyes fill with tears. They wonder how long it's been since they last had meat. One student says it melts in their mouth, and they can't believe they're eating something this delicious. All the students start chanting "Wardeness Maken, Wardeness Maken." Li Han notes that they charge triple the usual price, but they still sold a lot. Li Han suggests that there's no other way for them to have meat. It's a situation where everyone benefits. Gainando hears the loud commotion outside and is curious. He comes out and asks what's happening. Li Han spots Gainando and invites him to eat. Gainando is surprised and asks if he can really have some. Li Han tells him not to hesitate and eat. Gainando expresses gratitude for the food. Then, Li Han grabs Gainando's hand and asks for 1 silver coin. Gainando is taken aback and wonders if Li Han is charging money. Li Han explains that a noble's pride wouldn't allow people to eat for free. Gainando admits that he doesn't have any money right now. Li Han reassures him, saying that it's not a problem. He shows Gainando a contract form and explains that all he has to do is specify an amount and sign his name. Gainando, with tears in his eyes, asks Li Han why he's so kind. He believes that he has an excellent ability to recognize good people and is glad to have such a nice friend. Gainando thinks this is what true friendship feels like. It was a satisfying day for everyone, and they enjoyed themselves. However, some students are puzzled about the subject Basic Magic Personality Education. They wonder why students like them, who come from noble backgrounds, need to learn something like this. They believe they are already perfect and find it hard to take the subject seriously. Li Han can't believe these noble students can be so unironically conceited. Suddenly, they hear a voice saying good morning. Li Han is surprised and realizes that it's the voice of the personality education professor, who is also the headmaster. The headmaster, Lich, comments on how the students managed to find food, which took them a whole month to do. A student questions the headmaster, Lich, and asks if he truly expected them to find food on their own. The student wonders why they all have to go through this. Lich interrupts the student and tells them to stop their pointless chatter. He expresses his satisfaction that they have finally realized this. However, Lich points out that they have new students every year, and the Blue Dragon's Tower has always been the slowest to adapt. In contrast, the Black Turtle's Tower adapts the fastest, followed by the White Tiger's Tower. Lich explains that the Blue Dragon's Tower, mostly composed of nobles, tends to struggle with adapting because they haven't faced hardships before. Nevertheless, Lich acknowledges that they have already adapted quite well, which is impressive. Lich also reveals that he is well aware that Li Han played a significant role in their adjustment. He recognized Li Han's exceptional adaptability from the moment he saw him. Lich is surprised that someone as flexible as Li Han comes from a family known for being stubborn. The headmaster believes that being flexible and thinking freely are essential qualities for magicians. That's why he ensures his students constantly face challenges. A student asks the headmaster about the purpose of their class. The headmaster responds by asking the student what they think it is. The student admits they are not entirely sure. The headmaster explains that the class exists because the emperor forces the Lich to take responsibility for the actions of the graduates from this academy. The headmaster emphasizes that many problems have been caused by previous students. If anyone were to be held accountable for issues related to their personalities, it would have serious consequences. Headmaster Lich explains that he must use this class as a way to justify his students' behavior. He asks if they understand, and he calls them idiots, which frightens the students, causing them to say yes. Lich emphasizes that magicians can be unpredictable, and he warns them not to deny it or claim they are different, as such statements only upset him more. He instructs them to open their books and read the first page, which states, "They will not cause harm to ordinary people with magic." He asks them to read it aloud, and the students repeat the sentence loudly over and over again. Li Han is puzzled and wonders if this method is effective. Nonetheless, the students continue to repeat the same sentence loudly. The Lich headmaster addresses the class, saying, "All right," and he hopes today's class helps all of them develop a kind heart. He also requests 2 volunteers to assist him with the class. Li Han notices that everyone is avoiding volunteering, and even though it seems troublesome, he considers it. The Lich headmaster asks aloud if nobody steps up, won't they all suffer more? Li Han decides to offer his help, believing that there could be benefits to doing so. The headmaster notices Li Han's willingness and remarks, "It seems like Li Han wants to take on the challenge, huh?" Li Han asks if it wouldn't be an honor for him to assist a professor he respects. The headmaster responds, saying he doesn't like insincere comments, but adds that it's okay because opportunities often come to proactive people. Li Han suspects that the headmaster has realized he volunteered for potential benefits. Then, Gainando expresses concern, asking Li Han if he's out of his mind and worrying about what the headmaster might do to him. Another student tries to calm Gainando down, saying, "Stop it, Wardenist isn't crazy." Li Han is sacrificing himself for all of them. Gainando thinks about it and believes that if that's the case, he should also step up for his friend's sake. However, Gainando finds that his legs won't move, and he stutters as he tries to say that he wants to help. But before he can finish, Ashan Dalkard interrupts and volunteers to assist as well. The Lich headmaster comments on Ashan's family, calling him a blockhead from the Dalkard family, but also mentions that the Dalkard family is skilled with documents. Ashan thanks the headmaster for the praise. Li Han notices Ashan and wonders if Ashan has the same goal as him. Ashan explains that he wants to repay Li Han for helping him before. Li Han tries to decline the offer, saying that Ashan doesn't need to do that, but Ashan insists that the Dalkard family is always good with calculations. Lich mentions that he appreciates Li Han and Ashan being friends, but says there's something important to do. He wants them to write down all the student safety rules for the next class. Ashan writes the rules, feeling angry and thinking he won't forgive the headmaster. He wonders how the headmaster can make them do something so unnecessary when he can use magic to do it instantly. Li Han is concerned that if Ashan is going to faint from anger. He thinks he knows why the headmaster asked them to do this. Li Han believes the headmaster is probably thinking for them to use magic to do it if they are so upset about it. However, they can't even use basic magic like illuminate, so how could they use writing magic? Li Han believes that if the headmaster had a conscience, he would have left them a hint to help. Ashan asks Li Han what he's doing, and Li Han responds that he's searching for a glimmer of hope they can use to solve the situation, something useful. Ashan wonders if it's okay for them to do that and mentions that it feels like stealing. Li Han reassures him, saying that no one said they couldn't, and besides, it's the headmaster's lecture hall. Ashan agrees, saying that perhaps stealing is all right once in a while. Li Han suggests they split up and search. While searching, Ashan remarks that there's unexpectedly nothing here. Li Han agrees, saying he thought they would find something. Then, Li Han notices a glowing drawer and asks Ashan to come over. He feels some magical energy. Ashan asks if it's true, and he decides to open the drawer. To their surprise, Lich emerges from that drawer. Li Han asks if this is an illusion magic. Lich explains that the fact they opened the drawer means they had the thought to make their labor easier. He hopes they found this answer as quickly as possible. Lich asks if it wouldn't be really sad if it took them a long time to complete this task. Then, he informs them that the last circle magic, basic control, is hidden here, and it's best for them to learn it as quickly as possible. With that, the headmaster bids them farewell. Ashan realizes that this is why the headmaster hid the magic here, and he can't believe the headmaster would do this. Ashan is puzzled about why the headmaster is using such a method to teach them. He suggests to Li Han that they should lodge a complaint. Ashan thinks that if they go together, they might even be able to confront the headmaster. However, he notices that Li Han isn't listening and is reading the spell. Ashan calls out to Li Han, who apologizes and admits that he started without realizing it. Li Han advises Ashan to think carefully about whether complaining would work against someone as unpredictable as the crazy headmaster. That's the way things work in Ein Rogard. Ashan agrees, saying there's a 95% chance they will fail. Li Han says he doesn't think there's even a 5% chance of success. He believes they can make it work. He urges Ashan to be quick and suggests they start practicing. They read about basic control magic, which emphasizes 3 important things: their will, the incantation, and their movements. The incantation for this spell is Move It, Move Control. Li Han tries it on a feather but fails. He realizes that magic is challenging to use. It might seem like a simple movement, but mana gathers differently each time. It's like trying to perform tricks while riding a wheel. Li Han tells himself to concentrate and treat this as his last chance. He remembers the pressure of past deadlines, the moments just before his homework was due. He tells himself to be as focused as a tranquil bamboo forest and as light as a feather. Finally, Li Han screams "Move" to the pen, and the pen moves as he commands it. Li Han exclaims that the pen is floating, and now he just needs to move it slowly. However, suddenly, the pen flies out of the window and gets stuck in a tree. Li Han wonders what went wrong. He realizes that there are 2 problems they need to solve with this magic. First, they have to successfully complete the spell, and then they have to keep their focus to control the object. Fortunately, once they complete the spell, controlling the object isn't that difficult. Li Han gives it another try, concentrating slowly on the pen. Just as he does, Lich appears and asks if they've had enough practice. Lich expresses his satisfaction and says he will complete the rest of the writing with magic. He hopes they understand why he made them go through this process. Li Han tells the headmaster no. Ashan is surprised and thinks it's really cool that Li Han targeted the headmaster. However, Li Han asks him to be quiet. Lich notices that Li Han is picking up the magic quite quickly. Lich even admits that Li Han is doing well, considering he called him an idiot earlier. Li Han wonders if that's all there is that Headmaster wants to say. He also notices that the Lich seems to be in a good mood, so he decides to ask the Headmaster for some tips on controlling objects. The Headmaster responds, saying it looks like Li Han has completed the spell and asks if controlling the object is difficult. Li Han agrees, saying that it is indeed challenging. Li Han thanks God because he thought it's due to his mana. The Headmaster laughs and says it's a lie, explaining that casting spells is the difficult part and controlling them should only take a few tries. Those who struggle with control are unique. The Headmaster asks Li Han what he can do, leaving it for him to figure out. Li Han responds, "Is that so?" and expresses gratitude, promising to practice more. The Headmaster realizes that making fun of Li Han isn't fun and realizes that Ashan might have reacted differently. The Headmaster tells them that their understanding of magic will grow as they use it and advises them not to worry, suggesting they go have lunch. Suddenly, Li Han gets teleported to the cafeteria. He notices that the Headmaster rarely uses magic when needed, but has no problem using it to send them to lunch. Li Han looks around and wonders if Ashan got sent somewhere else. He was sent to the clinic to heal his magic fatigue. Li Han notices that there's no one in the cafeteria since it's well past lunchtime. He gets served the same unappealing lunch. Li Han says, "It's better than nothing." He still has some smoked meat that he made last time. Princess Ardenart comes up to Li Han and says, "There he is." Li Han asks the princess what she's doing here. The princess hands Li Han a document and tells that here's the information he asked for last time. Li Han thanks the princess. Li Han notices that the document doesn't have courses to get high grades in, but instead has popular courses listed. Li Han notices that understanding of alchemy is also on the list, and he wonders why it's considered a popular course. Li Han thinks it's better than nothing, but he tells the princess that there might be a misunderstanding. Li Han explains that he was actually looking for courses to get high grades in, not popular ones. He says that popular courses can be challenging because of the high competition, while unpopular ones have fewer competitors, making it easier to get good grades. The princess is surprised and asks if Li Han was really looking for courses to get good grades. She thought that he, as the child of Wardinus, would be more noble-like. Princess realizes she might have been wrong about him earlier. The princess shows another list of unpopular lecture topics. She explains that while she was working on it, these were the courses that caught her attention. Li Han takes the list and says these are the ones he's looking for. He can already tell that people wouldn't like these topics. The first one is basic swordsmanship, and there aren't many people at a magic school interested in learning sword skills. The other one is repeated practice of basic magic battle, but most students prefer research over fighting. However, Li Han doesn't care and thanks the princess. She says goodbye and leaves. The next morning, Li Han feels disappointed that everyone declined his invitation. When he asked Gainando if he wants to attend an unpopular lecture, Gainando wondered why. He doesn't see the point. Yoner also apologized, saying she already has a class at that time. Ashan asked Li Han why he's trying to waste his time like that. Li Han understands that you can't predict what might happen in schools and with professors. They don't really think about how their actions affect others. Even though they know you might be attending other classes, they don't care about that. That's why Li Han needs a class that he doesn't have to worry much about, so he can focus on the important ones. It's like a trade-off. Li Han wonders why the lecture hall for repeated practice of basic magic battle is located in the basement of the building. Even though the stairs seemed normal, Li Han could sense that something was not right about this place. In the Empire, there's a saying that everyone knows: you mustn't enter the magic tower recklessly. Even though it may seem normal from the outside, once you step in, You might not be able to get out. When Li Han was younger, he asked Arlalong about a similar story he had read, wondering if it was exaggerated. Arlalong admitted that it did seem a bit exaggerated and explained that once you go in, you can never leave, and realistically, you might even die. Now, Li Han thinks of Ein Rogard as the Magic Tower's ultimate form. That's why, despite their curiosity, new students don't venture to explore the academy. However, Li Han still believes it should be safe since it's a school after all. He mentions that the dormitories and the first floor of the main building are perfectly fine. Then, the Lich Headmaster asks Li Han if he's going to the underground's first level. Li Han is surprised and wonders why the Headmaster is here. He sees this as an opportunity and respectfully tells the Headmaster that it's an honor to see him. Li Han was initially trying to go to the underground level 1, but now he's thinking if the Headmaster could share something with him. The Headmaster replies that he doesn't have anything to tell Li Han and darkly jokes that he might have to offer flowers to Li Han's corpse if it's found tomorrow. Li Han is irritated but manages to smile. He thinks that a graduate student should be able to smile despite harboring grudges and resentment. Even though the Headmaster tried to scare Li Han, he finds this place strangely normal, but he can't shake the feeling of something ominous. Li Han notices another student who seems to know Li Han is here for the same class. Li Han realizes there are many students here, and he's not the only one. The students suddenly pause and wonder what's going on. They realize they'd entered a class called Basic Magic Combat Repetitive Practice, and they're in the wrong place. They realize they almost made a mistake and could get into trouble. Some students suggest hurrying back, questioning if anyone would actually take such a class. Another student expresses disbelief, saying there's no way they should stay, especially since even the students from their tower seem scared. Li Han is left without words as he enters the class, and there are only 3 students present. They quietly discuss that they might have accidentally ended up in the wrong class, and Li Han realizes that they probably didn't intend to be here. Looking around, Li Han notices a strange globe on every desk and wonders what it is. Suddenly, someone instructs him to tie up and take his seat. Startled, Li Han looks back to find the source of the voice. He didn't even notice the professor's presence at first. Li Han observes the professor's pale skin, gloomy eyes, and long canine teeth, making him wonder if the professor might be a vampire. The professor introduces himself as Bloody Greg and mentions that he's in charge of the class. Greg expresses his anticipation for teaching all of them. He explains that the globe on their desks is made from a spirit star stone, a special type of rock sensitive to mana. When constellations fill the sky, these stones absorb their divine power and change. The professor instructs everyone to stand up and infuse their mana into the globe on their desks. Li Han wonders if he can do it, recalling his previous failure with Illuminate Magic, which is considered a basic spell. Surprisingly, everyone's globe starts floating in the air, including Li Han's. He begins to think that perhaps this isn't just an ordinary spirit star stone. Maybe it is an artifact. Li Han looks at the marking on it and thinks that Greg probably made it himself. He remembers hearing that well-made artifacts can be sold for a lot of money. Suddenly, one of the globes starts acting erratically, and the students scream, fearing it might break through the ceiling. Greg explains that these balls are connected to their thoughts and can be controlled. However, he adds that he's put a spell on them to prevent any damage to the lecture hall, which calms the students down. Then, a ball accidentally hits a student, and Greg clarifies that the spell doesn't protect the students, just the room. He asks them to be careful not to damage the balls. The student who got hit asks if the professor means they should be careful not to hurt themselves, to which Greg responds by instructing them to try making the ball float again. Li Han realizes that Professor Greg is quite strict and demanding. Greg also tells them to draw a circle, making Li Han understand that even though the ball is an artifact, it's still challenging to control. The ball doesn't move the way they want it to. A student excitedly tells Professor Greg that they've drawn a circle. Greg asks them to do it again. The student asks that they won't have to keep doing this for the whole class, right? Li Han asks the professor when they'll stop drawing circles. Professor Greg replies saying that when they can do it perfectly, of course. A student asked for permission to use the restroom, but Professor Greg tells them they don't need to ask for permission. These students leave, wondering what kind of class this is. Another student also wants to leave but suddenly faints. Lee Han wonders if this student is pushing her act that far. Lee Han sits down beside her and asks if she's okay. She replies in a shaky voice, saying that her magic. Lee Han suddenly realizes she wasn't pretending. She was genuinely in trouble. He tells Professor Greg that she passed out because she used up all her mana. Greg advises Lee Han to tell her to continue making circles once she recovers. Lee Han realizes that it seems like he will be the only student left in the class. Curiously, he asked Professor Greg how points are given in this class. The professor explains that regardless of how many students are present, he assigns points based on their performance. Lee Han thinks this class is perfect for him. As long as he keeps it up, he will definitely get a good score. This is exactly what he was looking for. Repetitive tasks like making circles with the artifact. Lee Han actually enjoys them. Professor Greg is surprised that Lee Han decided to stay in the class, and he finds it impressive. Every year, new students come and go like waves, and no one ever stays after the first lecture. Even last year, not a single student stayed, but Professor Greg didn't really mind. His contract with the headmaster only required him to hold a class every year, not necessarily to have students attend. So, Greg would often stay in an empty lecture hall, hoping time would pass without anyone showing up. However, today is different. A new student, Lee Han, has stayed, breaking Greg's expectations. Based on Lee Han's actions and the way he speaks, it's clear that he comes from a noble family. Despite his apparent youth, he seems mature. Professor Greg isn't entirely sure what kind of magic Lee Han possesses, but he can tell that the boy is special. Greg would be happy if Lee Han kept attending the class. If that happens, Greg believes he can move forward with the lecture for the first time. In the restroom, two students are having a conversation. One student asks the other to pay attention because it's important information. Lee Han tells Yoner and Gaynando that they should attend this class, and all they have to do is stay there to get a good grade. Gaynando wants more details and asks what exactly Professor Greg teaches. Lee Han explains that they infuse magic into a crystal ball provided by Professor Greg and practice drawing circles with it. Gaynando then asks what comes after that, and Lee Han informs them that Professor Greg hasn't said anything more. Yoner and Gaynando are confused and question whether they think Professor Greg might be a fraud. Lee Han asks why that matters and reminds them that they are guaranteed a good grade. Yoner realizes that Lee Han is something else. She used to think she was something else as well, but Lee Han seems very practical and straightforward. Lee Han says it's okay if they genuinely disagree with the idea. He mentions that he needs to go to his next class, so they ask him what his next class is. Lee Han tells them it's basic swordsmanship. Yoner and Gaynando are surprised that he's studying swordsmanship at a magic school. Later at the southern front yard of the main building, Lee Han wonders if this is where the basic swordsmanship class is held. He notices there are more people than he expected, and they all seem to be from the White Tiger Tower. Most of the students from the White Tiger Tower come from knight families, so they are skilled in swordsmanship and take the class seriously. Lee Han thinks that the class on magic combat was probably too perfect for him, so this one should be fine. Students start whispering, wondering if Lee Han is from the Blue Dragon's Tower. One student recalls that Lee Han should be from the Wardeness family. They speculate if Lee Han came here because he received training from his nanny. They believe there's a limit to how much one can look down on swordsmanship. Lee Han had heard that children of knights were proud of their sword skills, but this seems to exceed his expectations. Nevertheless, he doesn't really care since they're all just teenagers. An orc approaches Lee Han and asks if he's the son of the Wardeness family from the Blue Dragon's Tower. Lee Han asks what if he is, and the orc suggests that Lee Han might be in the wrong place because this class is for serious swordsmanship practitioners. This isn't a class for beginners. Lee Han asks, is that so? And thanks the orc for clarifying. The orc grits his teeth and asks Li Han if he doesn't understand. It's not like those fancy sword tricks nobles do. Here, they practice for real duels. The orc warns Li Han that the other students won't hold back. Li Han reassures the orc that he knows and promises not to hurt anyone if they have to duel. This makes the orc really angry. Then, the professor arrives and gathers the students. He introduces himself as Professor Engoldel and says he'll be teaching swordsmanship for the semester. Li Han notices that the swordsmanship professor is an elf. Professor Engoldel believes that all the students have some experience with a sword and have either come to improve their skills or maintain their current ones. He explains that instead of starting from the basics, he'll be helping them enhance their techniques. A student approaches Li Han from behind. This is a student elf. The elf asks Li Han if he's part of the Wardeness family. Li Han wonders what's going on and asks the elf what's up. The elf tells Li Han that he's curious why someone from a famous magic family like Li Han's is learning swordsmanship. Li Han explains that it's because fewer people are interested in swordsmanship, so it's easier to earn points. The elf is surprised by this answer. Li Han thinks that instead of causing a misunderstanding with a different explanation, it's better to say it's just for earning points. The elf understands and reveals his name as Jijul from the Marathi family, asking Li Han to call him Marathi. Li Han notices that Marathi looks young but has very rough hands. Nevertheless, Li Han agrees and says it's nice to meet Marathi. Li Han is wondering if Jijul comes from the Marathi family. This family is known for guarding the tough north region with strict rules. They use any method to achieve their goals. But when Li Han looks at Jijul, he seems quite different from what Li Han expected. It makes Li Han realize that rumors are not always accurate. He starts to think that maybe he and Marathi could become good friends. Cliff Boulder Blade is a technique Li Han learned from Arlalong. Just as the name suggests, this technique is strong and straightforward. It's so tough that most nobles avoid it, but Li Han chose to endure the challenging training. Why did he do that? Well, he didn't have much of a choice. The elf professor asks Li Han about his family background since Li Han seems to have a good grasp of the basics. The professor is thinking that since Li Han is using the Cliff Boulder Blade technique, he might belong to a specific family. Li Han reveals that he's from the Wardeness family. This shocks the professor because he wonders how someone from the Wardeness family is so skilled in these basics. The elf professor asks Li Han why he's learning swordsmanship. Li Han responds that he believes it's an important skill for people of noble birth. The elf professor responds by saying that it is as he thought and makes a weird face. Li Han notices this expression and realizes it's a common look for instructors. He's worried that his grades might drop if he says the wrong thing. So, Li Han tries to guess what answer the elf professor wants to hear. He says that he initially thought the same way, that swordsmanship was only for nobles. However, as he learned more about it, he started to appreciate the depth and complexity of swordsmanship. He adds that he couldn't resist the urge to study it further. The elf professor is pleased with Li Han's answer and gives him a thumbs up, awarding him full points. The professor then chuckles and downplays his own reaction, saying it's not a big deal. Because accidentally, he voiced his thoughts out loud. The elf professor notices that Li Han is taking his studies seriously and isn't letting his family's reputation hold him back. He even goes on to say that Li Han is doing better than some students who are only here for show. The elf professor appreciates what he's learned from Li Han. Then, the professor takes out his sword and tells Li Han that he'll face him seriously. He asks Li Han to get ready with his own sword. Li Han is confused and thinks this isn't how it's supposed to go. Later on, Li Han ends up on the ground. The professor explains to Li Han that the Cliff Boulder Blade technique is like a sturdy rock. It doesn't waver no matter who or what challenges it. That's the essence of the Cliff Boulder Blade. The professor advises Li Han to remember this deeply. After helping Li Han get up, the professor says that's enough for today and moves on to the next students. All the students get frightened. Li Han feels aches and pains all over his body, and he's really sore. He wonders how many times he got hit during the practice. Li Han realizes that the professor is incredibly skilled at targeting unguarded spots, and he got hit a lot. When the professor asks for the next student, Li Han realizes that the professor is a formidable opponent. Even though the students from the White Tiger Tower will become future knights, the professor handles them easily. Comparing the professor to Arlalong, a swordsman who is like an unyielding rock, the elf professor Ein Rogard is more like flowing water. He's skilled even with a prosthetic arm and leg. Li Han remembers that the elf professor had advised him to move more because of the violent cloud sword technique. Li Han needs to add more movement to his swings. The twin swords he wields are challenging and intricate, and the professor advised him to put more thought into his swings. The high mountain moonblade he uses should be faster and sharper. The professor told Li Han not to overthink and to put all his effort into moving forward. Li Han thinks the elf professor is a true instructor. He can see how skilled the students are and gives them direct advice. Li Han also wonders if it's just him, but it feels like the elf professor hit him the most during practice. The professor says it's almost time, and then he calls Li Han from the Wardeness family and Darugu from the Choi family to come forward. Li Han is curious about why the professor called him. Darugu is the same guy who had a fight with Li Han earlier. The elf professor tells Li Han and Darugu that they will now spar with each other. This surprises everyone. The students are curious about why these two, Li Han and Darugu, were chosen. They're wondering if it will be a fair fight. Darugu, with a smug look, responds affirmatively to the professor's request. The elf professor gives them both wooden swords for their practice match. Li Han notices Darugu's smirk and realizes that Darugu is eager to compete against him. Given the situation, Li Han decides that he won't back down. He remembers that when he was younger, he could have spent his time playing and having fun, but instead, he chose to endure hardships and learn swordsmanship. He did this all for moments like the one he's facing now. The reason elf professor Ein Rogard picked these two students, Li Han and Darugu, was straightforward. They stood out the most among all the students. Learning swordsmanship isn't just about reading or listening to theories. It requires practicing thousands of times and having real combat experience to become skilled at it. For instance, imagine there's a technique that aims to strike the opponent's neck. If someone only knows the technique but lacks the theory, understanding, and practical application to support it, they won't be very effective in a fight. To unleash the true power of a technique, a swordsman needs the knowledge and skill to back it up. Both Li Han and Darugu have met these requirements and have even started to infuse mana into their techniques, even if it's a small amount for now. This shows that they have exceptional talent as future knights. The elf professor instructs Li Han and Darugu to take their positions. As the professor observes Li Han, he's amazed that Li Han has such advanced sword skills even though he doesn't come from a knightly family. He imagines that Li Han must have faced some challenges within his own family because of this. Despite this, the professor is proud of Li Han's dedication. The professor is so impressed with Li Han that he decides to take responsibility for guiding Li Han on his path to becoming a skilled swordsman. Then, he announces that the duel between Li Han and Darugu is about to start, and he's excited to see how both of them will perform. The Choi family uses the Alpine Lunar Sword, which is a swift and agile sword that's quick and sharp. On the other hand, the Cliff Boulder Sword is a heavy and robust sword, known for its weight and strength. The professor believes that since Li Han and Darugu are complete opposites, they can learn a lot from each other. Rivals have a way of helping each other improve. Darugu steps forward and asks Li Han why he's not coming closer. He decides to attack Li Han first. However, Li Han quickly throws sand into Darugu's eyes, causing Darugu to miss his attack. The other students are surprised that Li Han used sand in the fight, and one of them asks the professor if that's allowed. The professor is impressed and says it's amazing. He tells both Li Han and Darugu that they should do whatever it takes because in battle, it's a matter of life and death. He mentions that Li Han understands this very well. The professor realizes that it might be hard for other students to grasp this concept because they come from families that value honor, and they may not have learned such lessons. Li Han has a mindset focused solely on winning, and he doesn't care about anything else happening around him. The professor recognizes that Li Han is a true swordsman. Li Han attacks Darugu with his sword, and Darugu tries to block it. However, Darugu is surprised because he got hit by a shallow strike. Darugu let his guard down because he underestimated Li Han, thinking he wasn't from a knightly family. Li Han notices that Darugu is flustered, and he knows he needs to keep pushing his advantage. Li Han saw Darugu fighting the professor earlier, and he knows Darugu is a skilled fighter. Li Han smirks and steps on Darugu's foot, trying to create a situation where he can win. Darugu is puzzled by why Li Han would do something like this. Seeing that Li Han is pushing him too hard, Darugu decides to roll on the ground to avoid Li Han's attacks. Li Han is surprised that Darugu is going to such lengths. Darugu feels embarrassed about how things have turned out, but he knows that he can't worry about his pride right now. The professor claps and praises both students, saying they're doing an amazing job. Darugu is frustrated because he's being humiliated like this, and he decides that he won't forgive Li Han. Darugu then attacks Li Han with all his strength, but Li Han counters effectively. This exceeds the professor's expectations. The professor thought Li Han and Darugu were both exceptional, but he didn't expect Darugu to have such mastery over the Alpine lunar sword. However, the professor notices that Darugu is quickly losing his stamina because he's using so much force. On the other hand, Li Han remains calm and responds only to Darugu's movements. Li Han realizes that Darugu is too agitated, but he wonders what's with Darugu's energy. Li Han tells himself to focus and keep a serious expression. He knows he has to increase his chances of winning. Li Han notices that Darugu's decision-making is getting shaky due to the unpredictable situation, and as a result, Darugu is making unnecessary moves. Additionally, when Li Han looks at Darugu's mana-infused sword, he's sure that Darugu's energy is running out. However, Li Han isn't getting tired from using mana. Li Han realizes that this battle is a race against time. Darugu is getting frustrated. He wonders if he's not putting enough power into his sword and why Li Han isn't getting tired. Darugu notices that Li Han's expression is unreadable, like trying to poke a needle into a solid boulder. He feels like he's under Li Han's control. Li Han makes a quick attack on Darugu, and the sword narrowly misses Darugu's ear by just an inch. The professor stops the fight and declares that the winner has been decided. He asks both of them to step forward. The professor thinks it's unfortunate because if Darugu had been more composed, the result might have been different. However, Darugu's own actions led to his defeat. The professor understands that Darugu is young, and it's normal to feel overwhelmed. Darugu notices that Li Han already carries himself with the demeanor of someone from a noble family. The professor tells the students that today's fight between Li Han and Darugu was impressive. However, he emphasizes that winning isn't the only important thing. The winner should be humble, and the loser should use this experience as motivation to improve. Then he tells both parties to move forward. The professor instructs both Li Han and Darugu to bow to each other as a sign of respect. Li Han is thinking that Darugu might not just let things end like this. He's worried that if Darugu decides to attack him, but then Darugu surprises him by speaking. Darugu says that it was a good fight and apologizes for his earlier rudeness. He also acknowledges that Li Han has the right to attend this class. Now, Li Han believes that Darugu isn't planning to catch him off guard and attack. Li Han shakes hands with Darugu and says that Darugu probably said those things because he was concerned. The professor starts clapping and asks the other students why they're not clapping as well. Later that night, all the night students gather around Darugu. They identify him as Darugu from the Choi family, and they're upset that he, as a student from the White Tiger Tower, was humiliated during the duel. Jijil Morady expresses his belief that Darugu intends to leave things as they are. Darugu, in response, admits that he lost because he has weaknesses. Some students in the group shout out that Darugu's loss was due to Li Han kicking up dirt, and they assure Darugu that it wasn't entirely his fault. However, Darugu takes responsibility and says that it was indeed his fault. Moretti interjects, saying that what's most important now is not assigning blame, but rather that their tower's honor and pride were affected by Daruga's defeat. He suggests that the Choi family needs to take responsibility. Darugu is puzzled and asks how he should take responsibility. Moretti simplifies the idea and suggests that if Darugu lost because he was alone, then several of them should accompany him. Darugu questions Moretti, wondering if, as a knight, he's not embarrassed. Darugu dismisses Moretti's words as the excuses of a loser. Some students quietly express surprise, saying they didn't expect things to go this far. Moretti notices that there might be opposition to the idea. He challenges those who disagree to speak up directly to him. Darugu steps forward and states that he's against the idea, clarifying that he doesn't seek revenge. Moretti taunts Darugu by calling him a coward for not participating. Moretti insists that they need to find a replacement for Darugu, and another student offers to take Darugu's place. Darugu knows that even though Lee Han is from the Wardeness family, it would be nearly impossible to win in a 3-on-1 fight, especially since these students come from families of knights who have been training continuously. Darugu feels determined, thinking that he can't just let things stay this way. He believes that a knight's pride is at stake, and he's ready to face the consequences of his decision. Darugu decides to stand by Wardeness. Darugu rushes to help Lee Han, but Lee Han throws a small stone at a knight student, causing him to fall to the ground. Lee Han warns the other 2 knight students that if they want trouble, they should come at him. Darugu is surprised and confused, wondering what's going on. A little while ago, some of the knight students formed a circle around Lee Han. They questioned him, asking if he believed they would simply let his victory go unnoticed. They threatened Lee Han, saying they would ensure he couldn't attend any more classes. Lee Han wonders if they are doing this because of the class, and he finds it irritating. He decides to confront them and asks if they know which family he comes from. The knight students respond by calling it cowardly to use someone's family background as a threat. They question if Lee Han thought that would intimidate them. Lee Han observes them closely and realizes that they seem to have a support network. It appears to him that there might be a mastermind behind their actions. Lee Han wonders if they expect someone else to fix this situation. He thinks that if they had considered this possibility, they might not have acted this way in the first place. Lee Han asks them who gave them orders to do this. He wants to know if it was someone from a powerful family whom they couldn't refuse. One of them tells Lee Han to be quiet and warns his friends not to be fooled by Lee Han. He orders them to encircle Lee Han and not allow him to escape. Lee Han realizes that being outnumbered 3-to-1 is too difficult. He remembers that Laurent had advised him to run away in such situations. However, now his escape route is blocked, and he wonders if there's another way out. Lee Han considers using his staff to cast a spell to move some stones. The knight students are surprised that Lee Han can use this type of magic already. They wonder if the Wardeness family is really different from them, as they suspected. Lee Han is relieved that his magic worked, and he wonders if this is enough to escape from them. Lee Han decides to keep going with his plan to escape. He tells them to move out of the way and warns them that if they don't, something might happen. Accidentally, one of the stones hits one of the knight students, and he falls to the ground. Lee Han realizes he didn't mean to do that and needs more practice. One of the knight students asks the others why they're being bombarded with rock arrows without any time to react. They are surprised that even though Lee Han is from the Wardeness family, he can use such powerful magic already. Lee Han knows this isn't what he intended, but he feels like he has to keep up this bluff. He challenges them, saying that if they want trouble, they should come at him. They warn Lee Han that he won't get away with this. Lee Han asks Darugu if he also came to fight him, to which Darugu responds with a firm no later. While sitting around a fireplace, Lee Han asks Darugu if Gazel made that kind of threat. Darugu clarifies that it wasn't Gazel but Jijul. Lee Han comments on this, saying, it was Jijul, right? He's curious if Jijul really said those things. He notes that the atmosphere in the White Tiger Tower is quite different. The people there are like a close-knit family and are generally cheerful. However, Li Han is surprised to learn that there's a hierarchy within the White Tiger Tower. Darugu draws Jijul's face for Li Han on the ground with a stick. Li Han asks, "Who is this?" He wonders if this is the same guy he encountered earlier. Li Han thought Jijul seemed nice, but his actions don't match his appearance. Darugu explains that a person's appearance doesn't determine whether they are wicked or not. Li Han then speculates if Jijul has a specific role to fulfill. While Darugu is talking, Li Han is thinking about Jijul's popularity. He wonders if Jijul might have a reason to approach him. Li Han finds it strange that they came to fight him. Darugu suggests that there could be several reasons that justify their decision to fight Li Han. First, Li Han is from the Wardeness family, which is known to be prestigious. If Jijul defeats someone like Li Han, especially one of the first-year students from such a renowned family, it will boost Jijul's reputation and power. Li Han asks if Darugu is suggesting that he's just a trophy for Jijul to show off his strength, and that idea upsets him. Darugu explains that his concern is that as Li Han continues to attend classes and show a good attitude, the students from his tower may continue to harbor negative feelings towards him. Jijul knows how to manipulate those feelings, and Darugu is worried about what might happen to Li Han. Darugu advises Li Han to be cautious and try to avoid the classes that students from the White Tiger House take. This way, Jijul won't be able to do anything to him. Li Han thinks it's good advice, but he's not planning to follow it. Firstly, it's not easy to find such a great class, according to Li Han's standards. Secondly, Li Han is upset that they would try to involve him in their politics. This is about pride. In the common room, Li Han pretends to be in a miserable condition and tells everyone that he was attacked by students from the White Tiger Tower simply because he's from the Blue Dragon Tower. Li Han is curious to see how his fellow tower members will react. To his surprise, they become very angry and wonder how students from the White Tiger Tower could do such a thing. They think it's crazy and that those students don't know who they're messing with. One of them suggests calling everyone on the upper floor. They wouldn't mess with Gainando, but why did they target Li Han, a member of the Wardeness family? Gainando is also puzzled about why he was involved. Li Han realizes that his tower mates are more passionate about this situation than he expected them to be. Li Han tries to calm everyone down and says there's no need to go to such extremes. However, they insist that they owe a lot to Li Han because he has provided food for them by hunting. They believe that without Li Han, they might have starved. Li Han thinks they're exaggerating, but one of the students gathers everyone else and asks them to line up. They all pledge to go and confront the students from the White Tiger Tower. Li Han realizes that he made a mistake by telling them about the attack. He didn't know how much the Blue Dragon Tower disliked the White Tiger Tower. Sometimes, people end up disliking those who are most similar to them. The students start looking for anything that could be used as a weapon and decide to head to the White Tiger Tower. Just then, Ashan arrives and tells them to wait. He suggests that they should listen to him before taking any action. Ashan advises them not to act hastily. He explains that the White Tiger Tower is for students from knight families, and if they go there recklessly, they will lose. Li Han realizes that Ashan is quite rational, as expected. He supports Ashan's point of view and tells everyone that he agrees with him. Ashan suggests that they should lie in wait and then attack strategically. The students cheer for Ashan and praise the Dalkard family. They express their trust in Ashan. One of the students urges everyone to get ready for the plan. However, Li Han puts his hand on his head and feels like an idiot for expecting something. He asks the students to wait and hold on. Li Han clarifies that he never wanted them to seek revenge. Instead, he explains that this is about his own honor, and he intends to resolve it on his own. One student argues that the knight students are cunning, mean, and petty, so dealing with them won't be easy. Li Han notices that this one student is passionately expressing his frustration about knight students without taking a break. Li Han explains to them that they all come from honorable families. He asks, isn't it embarrassing to behave like knight students? The students begin to consider Li Han's point of view, so he decides it's time to get to the main point. Li Han suggests that if night students start a fight with them, they should respond as a group. He believes it's more likely that the night students will come at them in a group, acting like cowards. All the students agree with Li Han and say they should stick together and be prepared. Li Han is relieved that he has avoided the problem of families ganging up on each other. As the students think about it, they wonder if the next class will be with the night students. One of them suggests that it's a good opportunity to make things difficult for them, especially since they have already mastered illumination magic. They are confident that none of the night students have mastered that skill. Li Han is puzzled and wants to tell the students to wait. He wonders if he's the only one who hasn't mastered illuminating magic. The next day, Yeoner is passing by the common room when she sees Li Han looking miserable. Li Han greets her with a good morning, but she gets startled and asks what's wrong with his face. Li Han explains that he didn't sleep because he was practicing magic. Yeoner is surprised and says that Li Han is not allowed to practice magic. Then she remembers that Li Han got permission last time, didn't he? Li Han confirms this and mentions that the others said they had already mastered illumination. Yeoner is confused and asks why that matters. She says it's the first time she's heard of it. Li Han notices Gay Nando and asks him why he's here at this time. He wishes Gay Nando a good morning, but then he pauses when he sees Gay Nando taking sausages out of his coat and cooking them over the fire. Yeoner comments on how Gay Nando, despite being a royal, has become something different. Li Han approaches Gay Nando from behind and tells him not to worry. They won't take his sausages, so he should eat comfortably. This startles Gay Nando, who asks when Li Han arrived. Li Han responds that he came when Gay Nando was carefully taking out his sausages. Gay Nando, with a trembling voice, claims he wasn't doing anything wrong. Li Han advises Gay Nando that his sausages are going to burn, so he should take them out quickly. Gay Nando complies and removes them from the fire. Li Han then notices that everyone looks hungry and in bad shape. They are all hungry. The only reason they aren't worse off is because Li Han sold them food. Yeoner acknowledges that without Li Han's help, their situation would be even worse. Li Han suggests that they should make preparations because they don't have many rations left. He also remarks that Professor Duragome is quite stingy. Even if they attempted to take some ingredients from Professor Duragome's cabin, it wouldn't work. Li Han remembers the last time he and Yeoner tried to sneak loaves and jam from Professor Duragome's cabin. They were caught red-handed. Professor Duragome scolded them, asking why they were taking extra food when they had already eaten their fill. Li Han acknowledges that there's no way to sneak food out of there without getting caught. Yeoner wonders if there's any way to create an opening, and Li Han thinks about it for a moment. Later, in Professor Garcia Kim's class, she could sense that something strange was happening among her students. First, after just 1 week at the academy, the students were already very hungry. Second, there was tension between the different towers. Because the students came from diverse backgrounds, there was intense competition, but the tension between the Blue Dragon and White Tiger towers was particularly high. Professor Kim instructs all their students to quickly sit down. One of the opinions from the headmaster is that the more they compete against each other, the stronger they will become. But Professor Gracia Kim doesn't fully agree with that. She wishes everyone could get along well. Professor Kim tells all the students to take their seats. She mentions that they all learned illumination magic last time and asks if anyone has successfully done it. Li Han, yawning from exhaustion, raises his hand. He managed to do it but had to stay up all night. Even though he's tired, he can't afford to fall behind. The students are shocked that Li Han raised his hand, but then they think, as expected of Vordanis. Li Han asks Gay Nando if he can do it too, as Gay Nando previously claimed. Gay Nando explains that he's getting the hang of it, but hasn't done it successfully yet. He believes he will soon be able to because they are both nobles. Li Han realizes he fell for it and thinks he's in trouble dealing with these pretentious noble students. Li Han realizes that he put in effort for no good reason. Professor Kim praises the fact that there are 2 students from the Blue Dragon Tower who could do the illumination magic. Li Han looks behind and sees that the other student is the princess. He sees this as another opportunity to get closer to her. However, The princess doesn't look back at Li Han, and he wonders if he did something wrong. Ashan nudges Li Han and tells him that it seems the princess believes in a strange rumor about him. Li Han asks what the rumor is. Ashan explains that it's a hurtful and offensive rumor. They say that Li Han cares more about getting good grades than gaining knowledge. Ashan finds it hard to believe, and Li Han is puzzled because, in truth, that's somewhat accurate. Li Han believes the rumor is true, so he has no words to say about it. However, he notices that Ashan seems very angry. Ashan expresses his disappointment in the princess and blames the person who spread the rumor. He can't believe the princess fell for such a rumor. Li Han is confused and asks, what? He suggests that the princess has the choice to believe it or not. This surprises Ashan, and he clenches his fist, asking Li Han how hospitable he's going to be. In Blue Dragon Tower, there are many kids from very great families, but Ashan thinks no one is better than Li Han. Ashan's family sent him here to make friends like Li Han. Ashan tells Li Han that he's a really nice guy. Li Han is puzzled and wonders what's going on with Ashan. Both Li Han and the princess then demonstrate their illuminate magic to Professor Gracia Kim. The professor claps for them and says, "Very good." She adds that it's not common for students to succeed with this spell in the first week. The professor is happy to meet such talented students. However, she mentions that there's no need for other students to feel down. She explains that illumination magic is the most basic kind and is the first step to understanding magic. The professor reassures the students not to be too disheartened, but Li Han feels like nobody is paying attention to Professor Kim. He sees all the students practicing magic and thinks they aren't even listening. Professor Kim tells everyone to calm down and return to their seats. One of the night students dismisses it, saying, it's just illumination magic." A noble student agrees, mocking him that nobody from the White Tiger Tower could do it. The night student mumbles that he'll prove him wrong. Professor Kim tells the students not to feel sad because they will be studying elemental magic this semester. The students get really excited about this because they find elemental magic amazing. The professor explains that as they all learn illumination magic, they will also gain knowledge about elemental magic along the way. Elemental magic consists of simple elements like water, fire, earth, wind, and darkness. It also includes more challenging things like gravitational magic. Elemental magic forms the basis for other types of magic, like summoning spirits and giving attributes to artifacts. To put it in simple terms, it's like learning addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division in basic math, and then using those skills in high school math. Even if you only learn the basics of elemental magic, wherever you go, people will treat you as an important person. Li Han is really excited about today's lesson. Professor Kim explains that they will be testing each of the basic elements because every student has an element that's right for them. Some students start talking quietly, saying it's pointless to learn all the elements. One student says she only wants to learn fire, but another student reminds her that she needs to be suited for it. Professor Kim taps the ground with her sword, and suddenly, all the candles in the room light up. She tells the students that the knowledge from their previous lesson applies here. However, she points out that they're not trying to create light this time but fire. She warns the students to be careful because unlike light, fire can burn them. Gainando gets scared when he thinks about the possibility of being burned by fire. The professor tells the students to repeat a chant in their minds and then says, "Burn." Her staff creates a mesmerizing wave of fire, and all the students are amazed by it. Li Han tries not to react like a child, but he secretly thinks magic is really cool. The professor asks if the students want to give it a try, and they enthusiastically say yes. They use their staffs to cast the burn spell. Li Han notices the candles and realizes that there's a reason the professor gave them candles. He understands that it's easier to imagine something if it's close to you. Li Han grabs his staff and says he's going to try, but Professor Kim quickly uses her staff to put out the fire on Li Han's staff. Li Han feels shocked and confused. The professor announces that Li Han will have to wait before learning fire magic. Li Han asks why and becomes worried because he wants to create cool magic. The professor explains that it's because fire magic can be dangerous. As Li Han thinks about it, he remembers how bright and painful the light was during a previous lesson. He realizes that if he can't control light, it might blind him. But the thought of fire exploding scares him even more. The professor reassures Li Han that they will try fire magic when he becomes more skilled. In the meantime, they will practice water magic because it's not as dangerous. The professor explains that water, like fire, is a basic element. Li Han isn't thrilled about it because he doesn't find water magic cool. But then he changes his mind. He realizes that fire and lightning are better for offense and earth and metal are good for defense. Water magic, on the other hand, has less obvious uses. One advantage is that he can find water to drink anywhere. Li Han wonders what he can do with it but understands it's for safety. Ashan expresses jealousy that Li Han is getting special instructions from the professor. Li Han asks Ashan to please be quiet. Li Han gazes at his reflection in a bowl of water and chants surge using his staff. He still desires to learn fire magic as well, but he tries surge again, and a water wave appears, astonishing everyone. They are all impressed that Li Han accomplished it in just 3 attempts. Professor Kim is also amazed and tells Li Han that it seems he has a natural connection with the water element. She shares the news with the class that Li Han has successfully performed elemental magic. The students are in awe and remark that it's just as expected from someone of the Wardeness family. They are surprised that it turned out to be such a significant feat. However, the night students are not pleased about it. Professor Kim tries to calm them down and explains that there's no need for everyone to be impatient because it may not work the same for all of them. She tells them that each person may have an affinity with a particular element based on their background. For example, those who grew up around fires might have an affinity with fire, while those from coastal areas might have an affinity with water. Professor Kim emphasizes that the more familiar one is with an element, the easier it is to manipulate it, leaving Li Han puzzled and finds it strange because he isn't particularly familiar with water. Li Han imagines that if he had any distractions during this practice, his professor might use waterboarding techniques on him. He notices the princess glaring at him and wonders why she's giving him such a look. The princess quickly averts her gaze, but Li Han is convinced she was indeed looking at him. However, while he's lost in thought, the magically materialized water he was controlling pours down on his head. The professor chides Li Han, explaining that distractions will disrupt the form he's trying to create. The professor politely suggests that Li Han should focus more next time. Li Han admires Professor Kim for her teaching style and considers her the guiding light of the school. He acknowledges her instructions and asks how long he needs to maintain the water form. The professor informs him that normally, students should do it until they run out of mana. But since that's not possible for Li Han, she requests that he keeps the form intact until the end of the lesson. Li Han is a bit surprised and wonders if that's not a form of physical punishment. He tries to ask the professor to wait a minute, but she doesn't listen as another student asked for her help. Professor Kim turns her attention to the other student who needs help, leaving Li Han frustrated. He clenches his fist, realizing that he had forgotten about the peculiar nature of professors, who are known for their eccentricity. Professor Kim understands that maintaining magic for an extended period can be mentally taxing, similar to walking on a tightrope. However, she believes that Li Han requires a specific teaching approach. The fact that Li Han successfully created a substantial water ball in just 3 attempts indicates an exceptional talent that defies conventional explanation. Furthermore, Li Han possesses an extraordinary amount of mana, making it even more crucial for Professor Kim to refine and nurture this exceptional talent. Professor Kim has confidence that Li Han will perform well. Li Han, on the other hand, is irritated because he believes all professors are eccentric. As the misunderstanding between Li Han and Professor Kim grows during the class, Li Han decides to speak with Professor Dueling after the class. Li Han asks Professor Dueling if he thinks the teaching method is too demanding. Professor Dueling appears confused. Li Han explains that the princess succeeded in fire manifestation. Yeoner discovered her affinity with wind, but Gainando somehow managed to avoid burning his staff. However, Li Han feels he achieves nothing as he spends the entire lesson staring at water. Professor Uregolum suggests that Professor Kim might have a particular fondness for Li Han, which is why she is teaching him that way. Li Han ponders this and asks if that's why Li Han is spending his precious Friday working in the vegetable garden. Professor Uregolum notes that Li Han has a lot of complaints. Professor reminds Li Han that he had volunteered for this task. A little while ago, Li Han approached Professor Uregolum and offered to help with the work around the cabin. Professor thanked Li Han for his willingness. Then, Li Han asked if he could have some of the food as a reward for his help. Professor Uregolum agreed, and Li Han quickly took a few bags of food. In a casual manner, Li Han also asked if he could take some food back with him. He claimed he was just going with the flow. However, Professor Uregolum scolded Li Han and told him to put the food down. Professor realizes that he can't let his guard down around Li Han. He finds Li Han's behavior quite unusual and wonders how someone like him is from the wardeness family. Professor then asks Li Han if anything else has happened, like conflicts with the White Tiger Tower. Li Han explains to Professor Uregolum that there are problems with the White Tiger Tower, and Professor Uregolum understands that the situation is the same as in previous years. Li Han realizes that this issue has been ongoing for a while. He expresses his concern that while there may be rivalries between different towers, it's not right to be fighting within an academy, especially when they are all trying to learn magic. Professor Uregolum agrees with Li Han and advises him to ignore any fights or conflicts and focus on practicing magic instead. He suggests that Li Han's time would be better spent that way. Li Han remains silent for a moment and then confesses that he has already been in a fight with them. Professor Uregolum is surprised and asks for more details. Li Han tells the professor not to look at him like that because he's also upset about the situation. The professor finds it strange because fights typically don't happen in the first week of classes. The professor asks Li Han how this fight started, and Li Han explains that students from the White Tiger Tower picked a fight with him because he joined the Swordsmanship class. Li Han expresses his frustration, saying that they are being mean. Professor Kim seems startled, and Li Han asks if the professor is okay. The professor then questions why Li Han is taking that class, stating that he basically entered the territory of night students. Mockingly, Li Han thinks it's good information and wonders if tigers are international creatures. He further explains that they are free to choose their own elective classes. The professor says it's okay since the fight already happened. He looks at Li Han and sees that he seems fine. The professor mentions that while he's not sure about magic, night students are skilled in fighting. Li Han agrees and mentions that it was tough for him too, especially since 3 of them came at him at once. The professor is so shocked that he spills his tea and stands up. Li Han asks where the professor is going, and the professor says that's enough work for today. He offers to make food for Li Han, and Li Han is surprised and asks if he's serious. The professor reassures him and says, yes, of course. However, in his thoughts, the professor worries that he should be kind to Li Han because he's afraid that once Li Han becomes the Empire's best swordsman, he might seek revenge on him. Later, while eating the food the professor prepared, Li Han asks if the professor takes care of his cabin all by himself. He wonders what about other people, and the professor responds that they are all lazy and have run away because they lack motivation. The professor tells that these are basic tasks for an alchemist and asks Li Han if he agrees. Li Han chuckles softly and says yes. He used to think these odd chores were just regular tasks because of all the work he did in grad school. But now he realizes that it's different. Li Han asks the professor if he can plant and grow something in this field since it's quite empty. The professor agrees and asks what Li Han wants to grow. Li Han mentions cabbage and spring onions. The professor approves and states that Li Han shouldn't tell him he plans to sell them. Li Han asks the professor how he knew, and he realizes that it's a common thing among seniors. The professor scolds Li Han, calling him a rascal since he is the first one to do so, but ultimately the professor tells him to do as he pleases. Li Han thinks that just eating the vegetables like this might be a bit plain, so he wonders if there's a recipe he can use to make them more interesting. Li Han asks the professor if there's a way to make something tasty with cabbage and spring onions. The professor suggests making a stew. Li Han seems surprised and asks, "Stew?" Actually, the empire has various food cultures depending on the region. For example, in the western region where the Wardeness family lives, they have a cuisine that includes bread and cheese. In the eastern region, their food habits are similar to Korean cuisine, with items like rice, noodles, red chili paste, and soybean paste. Curious, Li Han asks the professor if he likes stew. The professor admits that he does but tends to avoid it. Li Han is puzzled and asks why. The professor explains that stew is considered Eastern food, and he doesn't particularly like the dwarves in the Eastern region. Li Han inquires if something happened to make him feel that way, and the professor mentions that his distant elderly relatives live in the East and they always nag him when they see him. Professor tells Li Han about his recent experiences with his distant elderly relatives in the East. They asked him to sell regenerative potions because they are expensive, and they questioned why he wasn't making much money. They also wondered why he didn't visit them more often and why he used a long pipe. Li Han understands and comments on how strict the people in the East can be. Then, the professor asks Li Han what he's planning to do over the weekend. Li Han asks if he's expected to work during the weekend. The professor clarifies that he doesn't intend to make Li Han work on the weekend. Li Han is surprised and wonders if it's not common for professors to assign weekend tasks to students. He's starting to realize that his perspective might be different from others. The professor hints at the hungry students who might not have time to visit him over the weekend, suggesting that they might have other priorities. Li Han wonders if the hungry students might resort to extreme actions like setting the school on fire. The professor thinks that's going too far and explains that when students are desperate, they'll find ways to survive. He mentions that the Black Turtle Tower students will find fruit, while those from the White Tiger Tower will hunt. Li Han asks about the Blue Dragon Tower, and the professor says that although they react slowly, they are talented and will find a good solution in a few days. The professor realizes that this year will be different from previous years. Lastly, Li Han asks about the Phoenix Tower, and the professor explains that they are unlikely to be swayed by hunger. The Phoenix Tower students come from the Order's disciples and have practiced living frugally in the temple. They pray only in dire circumstances, showcasing their strong faith. Li Han decides that he'll go hunting with his friends over the weekend. He plans to gather more people to ensure they have an advantage if they end up in another fight. The professor notices that Li Han is not even going to try to avoid the night students, but the professor wonders if Li Han will avoid fighting with them. The professor also mentions that the night students might make a different choice. Li Han asks, like what? The professor replies, like running away. The Magic Academy is very secure, surrounded by castle walls with magic protection. However, every year, some students try to escape. It's normal to think that night students might consider running away when they imagine what life is like outside the academy. They might want new clothes, shoes, food like bread, butter, cheese, and jam, and all the other things they need daily. There are many reasons that could make them want to leave. The professor raises his voice at Li Han, noticing that he seems to be thinking about strange things again. The professor asks Li Han to wake up and explains that the reason tigers always try first every year is because they are straightforward and not overthinking things. Li Han asks if anyone has succeeded in the past. The professor says that some have succeeded, but privately, the professor worries that Li Han won't listen to his advice anymore. The professor gives up and tells Li Han to do as he wishes, saying that sometimes it's better to face more challenges when you're young. Li Han responds to the professor, saying, "No, not at all, instructor." He firmly states that he has no intention of running away. The professor jokes that Li Han should say that after wiping the drool off his face. Later, 3 people wearing hooded gowns approach Darugu Choi and advise him to focus. They suggest that if he wants to return safely, it's best to cooperate with them. Choi responds by saying there's no need to go to such lengths. Li Han takes off his head cover and, with a soft laugh, asks if it wasn't effective. Gainando, curious, asks Li Han and Choi if they know each other. Gainando specifically asks Li Han if he was not the one planning to threaten Choi. Choi replies that he would find it quite amusing if they attempted to threaten him, comparing them to small squirrels in his eyes. Gainando is surprised and asks, "Squirrels?" Li Han tells Gainando to calm down and then opens the curtains, causing the sunlight to hurt everyone's eyes. Yoner mentions that she's been wondering why Li Han is going to such lengths. Li Han explains that he was worried the other tigers might misunderstand Choi if he appeared friendly towards Li Han. Li Han then turns to Darugu Choi and asks if others already have a negative opinion of Darugu. Darugu expresses his gratitude for Li Han's careful planning and agrees that it could lead to misunderstandings. He thanks Li Han sincerely for his consideration. Li Han reassures Darugu, telling him not to worry about it and emphasizing that this is just a small favor. He then explains that Darugu will now be working as his confidential spy. Darugu, taken aback, questions, "A confidential spy?" He doesn't like the idea of being called a spy. Li Han reminds Darugu of his agreement to inform him if Murati does anything suspicious. Darugu, still seeking a more honorable title, asks if there's another term. Gainando suggests that spy isn't that bad, but Darugu isn't pleased with that and gives Gainando a look, so Gainando takes his words back. Li Han concurs and decides to refer to Darugu as an internal informant since he is acting out of honor and a sense of justice. Li Han clarifies that Darugu will play a solitary role in combating injustice, emphasizing the importance of his mission. Darugu asks, "A solitary role in fighting against injustice?" and considers that being called an internal informant sounds dignified to him. He agrees, saying, "All right, he is the internal informant." Li Han shakes hands with Darugu, expressing his enthusiasm for Darugu's important role and the great work ahead. Yoner wonders what Li Han has learned from his family that led him to this point. Li Han gets down to business, explaining that the reason he gathered everyone on a weekend morning is to come up with a plan to escape from the academy. Initially, they all agree enthusiastically, but when Darugu realizes what Li Han is proposing, he is shocked and asks, "What?" Darugu questions Li Han's seriousness. Li Han notes that Darugu seems against the idea and decides to use the 10 reasons he has thought up to persuade Darugu. Li Han begins to speak, but Darugu interrupts him, expressing his surprise at discovering that Li Han was also thinking about leaving. This revelation catches Li Han off guard. Darugu Choi may come from a knight family, but deep down, he is still a noble. The Tiger Tower students grew up without experiencing hunger, so it was especially tough for them to endure starvation. Because of this, the knight students feel they can't continue like this and decide to go hunting. They believe that since the students from the Blue Dragon Tower succeeded in hunting, they can do it too. The knight students want to teach the Blue Dragon Tower students, who often act superior due to their magic abilities, a lesson. However, Moretti arrives and tells everyone to be quiet. Moretti acknowledges that hunting is a good idea, but advises them to think carefully before taking action. Moretti questions whether hunting in their current location would be simple. He points out that the wild boar that Warden has killed had been set free by the alchemy instructor. Moretti explains that if they want to hunt such wild boars, they will need to go deeper into the wilderness, which might be risky. Moretti expresses concern about whether everyone will be safe, as they are not familiar with the terrain. One of the students asks Moretti if he has any other ideas. Moretti affirms that he does and proposes a plan. They will escape from the academy. He promises that he will make sure that kind of meat won't even be worth a second thought. The students get really excited and start asking if what Moretti said is true. One student wonders if it's even possible. Moretti assures them that he has a plan to escape and offers to let them join in. He doesn't plan to keep the plan to himself. The students cheer for Moretti and call him the best. However, Moretti emphasizes that they must follow his orders without question. He warns that if anyone does something useless and messes up his plan, there will be consequences. Moretti wishes them all a good night and walks away. Darugu overhears this conversation and shares it with Li Han. Li Han asks if it's true and if he can also join in by listening to Marathi. Darugu questions Li Han's seriousness, referring to what happened to Gazelle. Li Han dismisses it as a minor issue that no one would mind. Li Han asks if he's the only one thinking this way. He realizes that things have become more complicated. Initially, he had planned to spend some time trying to find a way out, given the instructors' personalities, which make escaping hard. However, Moretti claims to know a way out, and this changes things. Li Han doesn't see Marathi as naive as Gainando. Moretti seems clever and calculating, as he started using students from the same tower as him right from the beginning of the semester. There must be a good reason why Moretti believes they can escape. Li Han decides that they have no other option. He instructs Darugu to follow Moretti and find out what the plan is. Darugu is surprised and asks if Li Han is serious. Darugu questions whether this is honorable. Li Han asks Darugu to think about it and reminds him that they are currently in a difficult situation. They need to consider all options in this challenging situation. Darugu asks if Li Han is right. Li Han explains that there's a famous saying, "Know your enemy, know yourself." Darugu agrees and understands the point. Li Han places his hand on Darugu's shoulder and clarifies that this is just a tactic they're using. Darugu wonders if it's because of Li Han's persuasive way of speaking, but he can't quite put his finger on it. Darugu agrees that it could indeed be considered a tactic. Li Han expresses his confidence in Darugu's understanding and tells him that he will be monitoring Marathi from now on. He instructs Darugu to come to him once he learns about Marathi's escape plan. Li Han praises Darugu, calling him an incredible warrior and an honorable internal informant. Li Han guides Darugu out of the room, declaring that the mission begins now and that Darugu is capable of doing a great job. Darugu agrees and tells Li Han to trust him with the task. Li Han closes the door, feeling relieved that Darugu is on board. He realizes he needs to rethink the escape plan. Suddenly, Li Han is startled when he sees Gainando and Yoner standing very close to him. Yoner asks Li Han if he might have learned brainwashing magic before joining the academy, which surprises Li Han. He denies knowing any such magic. Later that night, Li Han gathers with Yoner, Gainando, Darugu, and a few others. He thanks everyone for joining the meeting about their escape plans. Nilia is shocked to hear about the escape and asks what he means. She questions if Li Han really wants to leave the academy and thinks he's crazy. Nilia initially believed they were just planning a hunting trip. Li Han reassures Nilia and explains that he has a well-thought-out plan. She realizes that someone from the Wardeness family, like Li Han, must have a solid plan. Nilia thinks that Li Han is definitely not like everyone else. She asks Li Han about the plan. Li Han shows a sketch of Marathi and explains that among the students in the White Tiger's tower, Marathi knows how to escape. He tells them that they're going to follow Marathi and do what he does. Nilia wonders if Li Han is seriously calling this a plan and tries to find an excuse not to join. Yoner points out to Li Han that this plan won't work without Nilia. Li Han agrees and asks how they could do it without Nilia. He wonders why the conversation is taking a strange turn. Li Han adds that the key to this operation is the tracking ability and instincts of a hunter, which only Nilia possesses. This makes Nilia blush. Yoner reminds everyone that they can't force Nilia to join. Li Han expresses disappointment, saying that if Nilia truly doesn't want to do it, there's no point. Nilia then concedes and says that there's no choice if she's the only one who can do it. On a night with a full moon, Moretti gathers his honorable friends and the noble knights who have sworn to follow his orders. He announces that they will be leaving this place tonight. All the students express their trust in Moretti and declare that they will finally be free from this terrible place. Moretti urges everyone to move forward. Moretti possesses a map and believes that as long as they have it, their plan cannot fail. In another scene, someone asks for a magic theory book for beginners, and the other person questions what magic is. The first person shows a book titled Ein Rogard's Legend and expresses disappointment, Wondering if this is all they could find, they apologize from Marathi Gazelle. This scene takes place 1 month before entering the academy at the Marathi family estate. Marathi asks for something more useful and questions if they believe such materials will be of any help. The others apologize and walk away. Marathi then notices something else and wonders what it is. Upon reading it, he discovers that it's an escape map of Ein Rogard. Back then, Marathi thought it was just an item for those who were falling behind at the academy. He's now glad he brought it with him because he understands why they made such a thing in the academy. All the students hold lit-up sticks in their hands to find their way in the dark woods. Marathi suggests that they can start moving now. Lee Han and his friends are secretly following Marathi. Lee Han asks if everyone is ready. Gainando questions why Marathi and his group are heading into the mountains as it's difficult to climb them. He mentions that there's a gate near the castle gate, which would be easier. Lee Han tells Darugu that he's entrusting Gainando to him, and Darugu agrees to take care of Gainando. Gainando is confused when Lee Han says he'll leave Gainando to Darugu. Lee Han explains that they have Nilia, who is excellent at climbing mountains, and both Darugu and Lee Han are confident in their stamina. Yoner is familiar with mountain paths because she often gathers in the mountains, but Gainando gets confused and asks what but. A little while later, Gainando asks for water because he's too tired from climbing. Darugu lifts Gainando onto his shoulders and continues climbing the mountain. Lee Han had anticipated that Gainando might struggle on unfamiliar mountain paths. Lee Han realizes that without Nilia, they wouldn't even be able to think about tracking those night students. He accepts the situation and decides to record everything in his notebook. Lee Han takes out his notebook and starts writing. Lee Han developed the habit of taking notes during his time in graduate school. Suddenly, Nilia tells everyone to stop. Lee Han asks what's wrong, and Nilia explains that the white tigers are acting strangely. She wonders why they suddenly stopped. Gainando suggests they might have arrived at their destination, finding it easier than expected. Lee Han questions if they have already arrived, but he doubts it could be that simple. Then, there's a sudden flash of light, and Lee Han is shocked, feeling a shiver down his spine. He asks if there are monsters nearby. Nilia reassures him that she has already checked for monsters. Lee Han considers the possibilities, and suddenly, they hear a voice laughing at them. They wonder what's happening, and it turns out to be their Lich Headmaster. He claims that he has caught them in the first week. All the students are shocked by the arrival of the Headmaster. The Lich Headmaster points at Marathi and accuses him of bringing fake maps, which the Lich Headmaster had distributed. Marathi is stunned and asks the Headmaster to clarify. The Headmaster explains that it seems Marathi obtained one of those maps before entering the academy, and suddenly, the map in Marathi's hand starts to disappear. The Lich Headmaster decides it's time to teach them a lesson today. Never trust a map of unknown origin. He explains that there's no way for them to know if it's a treasure map or a trap set up by an evil lich. The Headmaster laughs again. Marathi is shocked, and Lee Han is left speechless. Lee Han curses his Headmaster, believing that the Lich Headmaster doesn't care about teaching. He just enjoys punishing people. The Lich Headmaster instructs the night students to listen carefully, as it's time to return to the academy now. He explains the rules are simple. They just have to avoid the pursuers and return back safely. The Headmaster tells the students they can use any method to defeat the pursuers. He adds that they will be deemed guilty if they get caught by the pursuers and innocent if they manage to avoid them. The Headmaster starts laughing, and all the students begin to run. Nilia asks Lee Han what he's doing and urges him to start running too. Lee Han grabs Nilia's arm and tells her to calm down. Nilia is worried and asks how can she stay calm when they might die if they get caught. Lee Han reassures her, saying that he doesn't think the pursuers had noticed them. Even if they do get caught, the worst that might happen is they'll have to go to the punishment room. Nilia is frightened and asks what the punishment room is like. She wonders if it's a room with torture devices where one can never escape from. Lee Han tells her that she has quite an imagination. As Lee Han looks at the pursuers, he wonders how they can escape from this situation. He overhears night students saying they should get into formation and be ready to fight if the pursuers catch up to them. One of them realizes that they can't keep running away forever. Morady suggests they should fight. They all shout for honor and for the Knight's Code. Lee Han wonders why anyone would care about honor and the Knight's Code in this situation. Dueling calls out to Lee Han and suggests a way to escape. He believes they should forget their differences and work together to get out of this place. Lee Han appreciates Durug's insight and agrees. While the night students are buying time for Lee Han and his friends, they plan to execute a cooperation strategy as they run away. Yeoner, Nilia, and Gainando enthusiastically support Lee Han's plan. Lee Han explains that they need to break through the weakest part of the encirclement. Fortunately, the Tiger Tower students are buying them some time. However, Lee Han can't find an opening and begins to worry. Suddenly, he looks up and sees the Lich Headmaster. Lee Han begins to wonder if the Headmaster is still summoning the pursuers. He initially thought this might be some kind of test, as the Lich Headmaster had said they would be innocent if they didn't get caught. However, he now realizes that the Headmaster may never have intended to let them get away. Lee Han considers surrendering, especially since the students who split up and ran away have already been caught. But then he notices something strange. The pursuers seem completely uninterested in the area where he and his companions are standing. This puzzles Lee Han. Why would they ignore their side? Lee Han starts to wonder if perhaps the Headmaster doesn't know that he and his companions are here. Could it be that the Headmaster of Ein Rogard is unaware of their presence? Lee Han isn't entirely sure but begins to entertain the idea that maybe the Lich Headmaster isn't even present and that what he's seeing is an illusion, just like back when he saw the illusion of the Headmaster in his office. Lee Han thinks that if the Headmaster is a clone or an illusion, they should go in the opposite direction of the night students. He shares this idea with his companions and tells them that there's a way out now. They all ask if he's sure, and Lee Han confirms that they need to keep climbing the mountain. They start climbing, and after 30 minutes, Nilia assures Lee Han that the area is safe. She says there are no signs of monsters around. Lee Han uses his staff to cast illumination magic, providing light. Yeoner asks if the skeletal pursuers won't come all the way here, and Nilia believes they'll be fine because it didn't seem like the pursuers were chasing them. Dueling points out that the problem is how long those summons will remain active. He wonders if his plan to charge out of the encirclement might have been the right decision after all. Lee Han tells Dueling that he wouldn't be able to handle that number of skeletons. He explains that with such a large group, it's like trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Lee Han suggests that they take a break and eat something. Gainando agrees, and Nilia realizes she's run out of water. Lee Han uses his staff to create water through a spell, impressing Nilia, who recognizes it as water magic. She thinks it would be incredibly convenient for her when hunting. Yeoner asks if someone can start a fire, and Nilia uses her staff to cast a fire spell, creating a fire. Yeoner is amazed, and Nilia is impressed that it only took her one try this time because it was unstable before. Nilia admits that she's actually jealous of Lee Han's water magic, saying she'd prefer water magic over fire magic. Lee Han is surprised that Nilia is jealous of water magic. Nilia asks what's wrong, and Lee Han tells her that she should appreciate the magic she already has. Nilia agrees. Later, Nilia and Lee Han go to check if the skeletons are still around. Lee Han expresses his frustration, calling the Headmaster a lunatic because the skeletons are still swarming. Nilia agrees but questions if it's okay to say that about the Headmaster. Lee Han places his hand on Nilia's shoulder and tells her that magic comes from free thinking. He says that one should not suppress their emotions. Nilia starts to wonder if that's true, finding Lee Han's words convincing. Nilia suddenly shouts and calls the Headmaster mean and a crazy skeleton. She even says that wolves will catch the Headmaster at night. Then, she quickly hugs Lee Han and apologizes for her outburst. Lee Han notices someone approaching, and it turns out to be Morady. Morady asks Lee Han and Nilia what they are doing there. Lee Han invites Morady to join them at their resting place and tells him to come in. He encourages Morady and his fellow night students to rest. Gainando questions why they're letting night students in since they don't have enough food. Darugu tells Gainando to be quiet. Darugu thinks that Li Han has the right to ignore the night students because of his history with them. However, he's surprised and impressed that Li Han is treating them kindly. Darug realizes that Li Han understands what true honor is. Moretti wonders how the Blue Dragon students got there. He considers whether they might have followed the same map. It doesn't occur to him that they might have followed him intentionally. Moretti is unsure about what to do next, especially since he has received help from Li Han. Moretti remembers his father telling him something important. The motto of the Moretti family is that they remember their grudges. However, there's a hidden part of that motto. Debts are only paid when you remember them. Moretti decides that, for now, he should try to get on Li Han's good side. He asks Li Han what's happening in their current situation. Suddenly, someone collapses, shocking everyone. They wonder why this person suddenly collapsed, and a night student suggests that it might not be from exhaustion. Moretti is very confused and doesn't understand what's going on. He looks back at Li Han, who apologizes, saying it's too late. Moretti becomes angry and accuses Li Han of drugging the water. Moretti warns Li Han to just wait, but then he collapses too. Li Han smirks and says, "Nice," adding that it's one less thing on his to-do list. He admits that this may seem like he's crossing a line, but if someone hates him for no reason, he'll have to create a reason for them. Darugu is worried and asks Li Han what he did, while Gainando assures them that there is no poison in the water because he drank it as well. Yoner explains that they just fell asleep. Nilia explains that she didn't put anything in Gainando's drink. Gainando asks Yoner and Nilia if they knew about this plan. Li Han admits that he didn't involve them because they would have given it away with their expressions if they had tried to act. Li Han clarifies that he did it out of necessity and not for personal reasons. He tells everyone to calm down and explains that they need to place these night students near the pursuers. Darugu is surprised and asks if they're really going that far. Li Han asks if Darugu doesn't know what Moretti is like. Darugu sets that aside and inquires about where they got the sleeping herb. Yoner explains that she noticed a sleeping herb when she was out with Li Han. Li Han asked her what a sleeping herb is, and she told him that if they grind it into powder, mix it into water, and then drink it, they will feel drowsy. Li Han decided to take some of it, saying that they might need it eventually. Yoner admits she didn't expect to use the sleeping herb in this way. Li Han and his friends move the sleeping knights closer to the pursuers, who then take them away. Li Han says that they will disperse soon and suggests they finish the remaining task. Yoner asks what task Li Han is referring to, and he explains that he wants to explore the area. He believes they shouldn't just lead without investigating the surroundings since they are already there. Li Han is curious about the extent of the academy's walls and whether there might be a way to escape. He feels the need to discover at least one new piece of information. Darugu calls out to Li Han from behind and asks what they should do next. They all begin to explore the area, but Gainando is so tired that he falls to the ground. Yoner becomes concerned, and Li Han asks Gainando if he's okay. Gainando replies that he's in pain and hungry. Li Han notices that Darugu is too tired to help Gainando. Nilia suggests they get some light, as she doesn't think they will be caught this far in. She explains that everyone is getting tired more easily because they are walking in the dark. Li Han agrees and says he will cast a spell. He casts an illumination spell, providing light. Li Han says it's good and tells everyone to continue when suddenly someone asks them to turn off their light. This person complains that their sleep has been disturbed because of the light. Li Han is surprised and wonders who that person is. Everyone else is scared, and Nilia wonders where the voice came from. The voice instructs them to be quiet and says he will be the one asking questions. The voice tells them that if they give the correct answer, they will be treated as guests, but if they get it wrong, they should consider themselves uninvited. The voice then presents a riddle. A certain dwarf lit 5 candles late at night, but 2 of the flames were extinguished due to a strong wind. The dwarf, angry about this, blocked off all the windows in the room. In that case, how many lit candles are left? Li Han suspects it's a trap because one might think there are 3 lit candles, but the flames will actually extinguish as time goes by. Li Han starts to answer, but Gainando quickly interrupts and says 3. Li Han tries to stop Gainando, but the voice confirms that the answer is correct. Li Han is shocked and wonders how that's possible. Li Han thinks about the riddle and wonders were not the flames extinguished because the candles had burned out completely. However, he realizes that in such riddles, it's common to use candles with magic cast on them so they won't burn away completely. Li Han expresses frustration with the Magic Society. The voice then says they will treat them as guests and suggests asking another question. If someone answers correctly, they will receive a present. Li Han agrees, and the voice presents the second question. There was someone of huge size in the morning. He shrank when noon came. He grew larger in the afternoon and would disappear when night fell. Who is this person? Milia and Yoner are puzzled, but Li Han suggests the answer might be a shadow. The voice confirms that this is correct. Gainando is surprised and asks Li Han how he knew the answer to the riddle. Li Han had heard that story a lot in his previous life. It's the same riddle that the king of Thebes, Oedipus, correctly answered. Interestingly, even though the story may change a little each time it's passed down, the answer that people give tends to be quite similar. Li Han wonders if riddles are similar in different worlds. The voice praises Li Han for his intelligence and welcomes all of them. Suddenly, the surroundings transform into a beautiful garden and butterflies flutter around them. Yoner exclaims in amazement, noting that these are all spirits. The tree offers Li Han a drink, and the voice suggests that he must be tired after coming such a long way, urging him to drink it. Li Han thanks the voice but notices that the drink smells like vegetable juice. Li Han takes a sip of the drink, and it feels like all the tiredness in his muscles disappears. It's as refreshing as drinking cold water after running at full speed on a hot summer day. Gainando notices that the drink smells strange, and Yoner is curious if it's really safe to drink. The voice asks Li Han about the drink and mentions that it's made from plants. It wants to know if Li Han likes it. Li Han replies that it's delicious and asks for more. The tree takes the pot from Li Han's hands, but before giving him more, the voice wants to know who Li Han is. It realizes they haven't introduced themselves yet. Li Han says his name is Li Han. The voice then asks for his family's name, and Li Han responds that it's Wardenas. The voice is surprised and asks for clarification. It quickly apologizes, explaining that it reacted that way because of the rumors surrounding Li Han's family. However, it adds that by mentioning his name instead of his family's name, Li Han is showing great potential to become a powerful mage. The voice then asks why they are here so late at night. Li Han replies that they were just taking a nighttime walk. The voice questions if they're trying to find a way out of the academy already, even though they've only been there for a week. Li Han explains that they have some personal reasons for wanting to leave early and asks the voice if it could offer any advice. The voice responds that there is indeed a way to leave, but it's impossible for new students to accomplish it. Li Han then asks if the voice can at least tell them how far the academy walls extend. The voice says they can't know that either and warns them that the walls are enchanted with magic. If they touch them recklessly, they will face severe consequences. Li Han clenches his fist when he realizes that finding the end of the walls and escaping from there won't be an easy task. The voice advises them not to rush their escape plans because, although things might seem quiet now, all the monsters that are currently asleep will wake up in a few weeks. Li Han thanks the voice for this information. The voice notices that Li Han doesn't seem discouraged. Instead, he's deep in thought. It finds Li Han's determination interesting. Then, the voice remembers it promised to give Li Han a present. Suddenly, the tree branches surround Li Han and offer him a new staff. Li Han remembers what Professor Gracia Kim told him. For a mage, an artifact is like an arm or leg, and among those artifacts, a magic staff is a necessity. The new students have been dissatisfied with what the academy provided them, but today, Li Han becomes the first student to receive a new staff. The voice asks Li Han what he thinks about the staff. Li Han says the staff feels warm and alive. The tree notices Li Han's reaction and realizes that he's not an ordinary boy. The staff possesses a spirit, and it should have been challenging for someone of Li Han's age to detect its magical energy. The voice tells Li Han that he will come to understand the staff's powers once he starts using it. Li Han asks if the voice can just explain its abilities, but the voice insists that there's no need because Li Han will naturally discover them. The tree is impressed by Li Han's talent and temperament, which reminded of a wardeness from about 100 years ago. The tree believes that Li Han indeed has the blood of wardeness running through him. The voice informs all the students that it's time for them to return. The voice says goodbye and uses magic to push them all away. It warns Li Han not to use magic in this area. Li Han asks about the way to leave this place, but the voice explains that his magic is too strong and would wake up nearby trees. They all get thrown a long distance and cry out in pain. The voice tells Li Han to remember the riddle it gave him, as that will be the answer for him. After they leave the area and all the undead creatures have disappeared, it feels to Li Han like he just had a dream. They descend from the mountain at dawn, and Li Han, exhausted, collapses onto his bed. Suddenly, there's a knock on his room's door. Li Han, tired, opens the door and asks what's going on. Ashan says he apologizes for intruding, but there's something urgent to discuss. Ashan informs Li Han that the headmaster is asking everyone to gather outside. This news wakes Li Han up, and he starts to wonder if the headmaster is trying to identify the students who attempted to escape. Li Han decides that, in a situation like this, he should act normal. Li Han agrees to wake everyone up and gather outside. As they step outside, they notice that the grounds are fully decorated, and the students are curious about what's happening. It feels like a festival atmosphere. Observing this, Li Han realizes that it doesn't seem like the headmaster is trying to identify the students who tried to escape. He's left wondering about the headmaster's intentions. Then, the Lich headmaster appears and asks everyone to pay attention. The Lich mentions that priests from their empire have visited the academy this weekend and asks the students to applaud them. Li Han claps along, but wonders why the headmaster is giving such a grand welcome to the visiting priests. One of the priests thanks the headmaster for taking the time to meet them, despite being busy teaching the students. The Lich headmaster expresses his surprise that the priest understands his challenges and feels happy about it. He then asks the priest to convey a message to the king, requesting a larger budget for exploring new ancient magic. The priest softly laughs and says that such matters are not within their authority. Li Han realizes that budget problems seem to affect everyone, regardless of the world they are in. The priest adds that aside from that, they are honored to meet the young students and tells that they are just humble servants who represent various orders. They are delighted to introduce their orders to everyone at the academy. Li Han notices that these priests are not ordinary. They possess remarkable mana, which makes them stand out. Li Han can tell that the priests have a different aura compared to mages. The Lich headmaster asks Li Han if he finds the priests fascinating. Li Han is surprised, wondering how long the headmaster has been standing beside him. The Lich mentions that the priests possess unique mana, often referred to as divine power. Li Han understands now why he feels something special from them. The Lich headmaster asks Li Han if he can detect mana. Li Han admits to it and says he didn't mean to hide his talent. The headmaster mentions that there aren't many students who can detect mana like Li Han can. Li Han still feels he has a lot to learn. The Lich encourages Li Han to be confident and showcase his talent proudly from now on. Li Han is confused about what the headmaster is talking about. It's his first time meeting priests, after all. The Lich headmaster mentions that it's not surprising because people from the wardeness family, like him, don't have an interest in faith or religion. They are too intelligent to believe in such things. Li Han remembers his father saying that divine power comes from strong beliefs, and there are rumors about his family's dislike for priests. To avoid any issues, he decides to keep his family name a secret. The Lich headmaster comments on how the priests are going to great lengths for students who can be easily swayed by food, and he finds it pathetic. Li Han asks the headmaster if he has any priest orders that he would recommend. The Lich headmaster is surprised by Li Han's question and asks if he plans to join multiple orders. Li Han smiles, and the headmaster realizes that Li Han is planning to join several groups and gain something from each of them. The headmaster is impressed by Li Han's cunning plan. He understands that Li Han intends to join these orders to gather information and benefits. The headmaster is both surprised and amused by Li Han's intentions, finding him very impressive.